Once upon a time, in a small town named Willow Creek, there was a dark, twisty forest that everyone called the Whispering Woods. It was a place where sunlight hardly beamed through the tangled branches, and eerie shadows danced among the trees. The townspeople told stories about the woods, saying it was filled with secrets and magic, but not the kind of magic that brought happiness. No, this was a scary kind. They said that anyone who entered the forest after dark could hear whispers floating through the air, soft and sneaky like a breeze. The whispers sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to listen, hinting at things that should never be spoken. Many believed that the trees were alive and could see everything, their twisted forms lurking, waiting for someone to trespass. Despite the stories, a group of friends, two boys named Max and Leo, and a girl named Mia, found themselves curious. They loved adventure and were always looking for excitement. One cool autumn afternoon, they decided to hike into the Whispering Woods, eager to uncover its mysteries. In their hearts, they didn't believe the tales. They thought it would be fun. So, with backpacks filled with snacks and a flashlight, they set off towards the forest, laughter echoing behind them as they approached the dark entrance. As they crossed the threshold into the woods, the temperature dropped, and a heavy silence wrapped around them. The trees stood tall and thick, their leaves rustling like whispers of an ancient language. They tried to brush off their nervousness, laughing and joking as they walked deeper into the forest. At first, everything seemed normal. The trio marveled at the gnarled roots and moss-covered stones. They enjoyed spotting squirrels and birds flitting around, but slowly, the friendly sounds of nature turned into an uneasy quiet. Then, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, the air felt different. An uncomfortable chill crept in, wrapping around them like a cold blanket. Max glanced uneasily at his friends. "Maybe we should head back," he suggested, his voice cracking slightly. "It's getting late." But Mia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. We can't leave yet. We haven't even found anything strange." Leo nodded, but Max's heart tapped nervously in his chest. However, they continued on, moving deeper. As the sky faded into deep blues and purples, shadows grew long and thick. That's when the first whisper floated through the trees. It was soft and sneaky, sounding like it came from just behind the trunks. "Did you hear that?" Leo asked, his eyes wide. The others froze, listening intently. At first, it seemed like the wind, but then it formed a word that sent chills down their spines. "Leave." Max's heart raced. The wooden giants loomed over them, and a feeling of being watched crept in. "We should really go back," he urged again, but Mia, feeling brave, wanted to keep going. The whispers grew louder as they walked, swirling around them, weaving through the leaves. Every now and then, they could almost make out sentences, but the words slipped through their fingers like sand. "You're lost," one voice whispered. "You shouldn't be here," said another. The whispers filled the air, echoing off the trees, blending with their fear and confusion. Leo tried to reassure them. "It's probably just the wind," he said, but his voice came out shaky. They pressed on, and the scenery began to change. The trees twisted up towards the sky in ways that didn't look natural. They seemed to lean in closer, like they were eavesdropping on the children's conversations. Shadows stretched and twisted along the ground, dancing in ways that made the friends jump. It felt like they were not just surrounded by trees, but by something watching and waiting. Suddenly, Mia stopped, pointing ahead. "Look, what is that?" she exclaimed, her eyes wide with both fear and excitement. In a small clearing, they saw a tangle of vines and a strange, old stone archway. It looked ancient, covered in dark moss and twisted roots, as if the forest was reclaiming it. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them in a rush. "Go back," they cried in unison, but curiosity pushed them forward. They stepped into the clearing, drawn by an unknown pull. As they stood under the archway, a feeling of dread settled in their stomachs. Max shivered. Something was very wrong. "We shouldn't be here," he whispered, but the wind seemed to snatch his words away. Mia touched the cool stones, feeling a strange energy coursing through them. "It's just an old wall," she said with a laugh to mask her fear. "We can take a picture." But as she pulled out her phone, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into gloom. Suddenly, the whispers ceased, leaving a thick silence that felt heavier than before. The trees stood still, as if waiting for something. Panic rushed through Max. "We should really go," he urged again, his voice a mere whimper. But the forest had other plans. The moment they turned to leave, the path behind them shifted. The familiar trails twisted away, leaving them faced with an empty, dark expanse. "What's happening?" Leo exclaimed, trying to figure out which way to go. The trees, once helpful in guiding them, were now closing in as if the forest itself had turned against them. The whispers returned, louder and more urgent. "Stay, join us, you'll never leave." Their voices echoed, a ghostly choir ready to claim their prize. Max felt terror rise in his throat. They were lost, really lost. Wherever they turned, the same twisted trunks surrounded them, and the whispers seemed to mock their confusion. They stumbled through the dark, branches snagging at their clothes like hands reaching out. Shadows moved among the trees, darting just out of sight, and the children began to panic as they realized the forest was toying with them. Mia finally began to cry as she spun around, frantic. "We can't stay here. We have to find a way out." But the darkness had grown thicker, and the path they had come from had vanished completely. The whispers fluctuated with their fear, swirling through the air with a life of their own. Among the whispers, they could almost hear the stories of others who had entered the woods, endless tales of lost wanderers. "Please," Leo begged to the trees. "We just want to go home." But the forest didn't answer. It only tightened its grip. A cold wind swept through, howling like a mourning person lost in grief. That sound, it felt human, filled with sorrow and untold stories. They were not the first to face this darkness. Quickly, they formed a circle, holding hands as if the bond between them could shield them from whatever mystery was lurking. "If we just stick together," Max whispered, but even he didn't believe it would help. The dark trees swayed, and the whispers grew more chaotic, growing louder and louder until it felt like they were inside a storm. "Please," Mia cried out, "we just wanted to explore." But the forest seemed to tighten around them, and in that moment, a deep, echoing laugh rumbled through the trees, shaking their hearts. "Fools," it seemed to say, "you belong to the woods now." Shadows began to swirl, taking shapes around them. Max stood firm, even as his legs trembled beneath him. "We will find a way," he shouted into the night, hoping his courage would ignite hope in his friends. But hope was fading like the light around them. The trees felt endless now, a maze built from despair. The whispers told tales of those who came before, their laughter slowly turning into cries of fear as the forest claimed its own. "They won't find you," it hissed through the leaves. "You'll be ours forever." With each step, the forest felt heavier. The trees creaked and groaned, their voices merging into a terrifying cacophony that spoke without lips. "Stay with us, stay, stay." The word pressed against their ears like a fog, trying to bury them in confusion. As they ran, the trees seemed to separate, creating paths in front of them, but each turn led them deeper into the heart of the forest, away from safety. Suddenly, as they stumbled forward, Mia tripped over a root and fell. "I can't," she cried, panic streaking through her voice. Max and Leo rushed back to her side, holding her tightly, whispering words of encouragement. "We're going to be okay," Max promised, even as doubt gnawed at his heart. But as they looked up, the world around them shifted once again. The trees loomed closer, their branches reaching out like fingers trying to grasp them. It felt as if the whole forest was breathing, its heavy sigh wrapping around them. "This way," Leo shouted, pointing toward a glimmer in the distance. The hope of escape surged through them, and they charged forward, hearts pounding in their chests, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out their thoughts. "Lost! Lost! Forever lost!" The words wrapped around them like chains. They ran through the trees, feeling branches tug at their clothes, trying to pull them back. Fear became a fire in their chests, pushing them on, but it felt like the forest itself was trying to pull them apart. Just when they thought they had broken free, they stumbled into a clearing, the air suddenly still. But the trees loomed tall and ominous around them, and they felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching their every move. Just beyond was a thick wall of blackness, a curtain of shadows, enticing them to walk into it. They could almost hear whispers of encouragement, ideas of leaving everything behind and merging with the woods. "No!" Max shouted, his voice cracking. "We're getting out of here!" He took Mia's hand, then Leo's, and began to back away slowly, trying to retrace the steps that had brought them here. The whispers turned urgent and angry. "You can't leave. You belong to us." With every step, the path shifted, roots and branches moving like snakes beneath their feet. For every step they took, the edge of the forest twisted, pushing them back, inward, deeper and deeper. But determination gripped their hearts. They could hear the distant sound of their town, a soft reminder of sunlight and safety beyond the darkness of the trees. As they pressed on, they screamed together, pushing back against the weight of the night. "No!" It echoed through the woods, and for a moment, the whispers faded, disturbed by their courage. They sprinted through the dark, dodging branches and leaping over roots, legs burning with effort, and fear clawing at their backs. The trees thinned as they ran, revealing glimpses of moonlight breaking through. They could see the outlines of the forest's edge, and hope ignited a new kind of energy. "Almost there!" Leo shouted, a burst of adrenaline pushing him forward. But just as they reached what they thought was freedom, the ground beneath their feet shook ominously, and the whispers roared with fury. "Stay!" they cried, and the darkness exploded. Shadows rushed at them like a wave crashing against the shore. Just a bit further, Max urged silently, picturing the warm lights of home. But the trees were furious now, branches streaking through the air, trying to hold them back. In a blink, they burst through the final line of trees, tumbling out into the clear night air. The cool breeze mingled with their frantic breaths. They turned to see the forest dark and twisted behind them, the whispers echoing off the trees. They were free, but the memory of the whispering woods would haunt their dreams forever. And yet, even as they raced toward the safety of town, the whispers never faded completely. When night fell, they could still hear it, soft on the wind, calling them back to the dark, silent trees. No matter how far they ran, a part of them felt that the woods would always be watching. The whispering woods held secrets, and one day, those secrets may want to tell more than just stories. Cider fusion. The trio stumbled into the warm glow of Willow Creek, their hearts still racing from the harrowing escape. The familiar sounds of the town, the laughter of children, the distant bark of a dog, and the comforting hum of life wrapped around them like a safety blanket. Yet, despite the relief flooding their senses, an unsettling feeling lingered in the pit of their stomachs. As they walked through the quiet streets, Max, Leo, and Mia exchanged glances, each of them silently grappling with the weight of their experience. The forest had felt alive, a sentient being intent on keeping them within its twisted embrace. Max shivered at the thought, the memory of the whispers still echoing in his ears. "Do you think anyone else has ever gotten lost in there?" Leo asked, breaking the silence as they reached the town square. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery light over the cobblestones, but the shadows seemed to stretch longer than before, creeping into the corners of their minds. Mia shrugged, trying to brush off the fear. "Probably, but they're just stories, right? Just tales to scare kids." But her voice lacked conviction, and the tremor in her hands betrayed her bravado. Max felt a pang of guilt. "We shouldn't have gone in there. We should have listened to the stories." His voice was heavy with regret. It wasn't just a forest. It was something else entirely. As they approached Mia's house, the lights flickered on, illuminating the porch and casting a warm glow around them. "I think we should tell someone," Mia suggested, stopping in front of her door. "Maybe the mayor or the local historian. They should know what we found." Leo nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "Yeah, but what will we even say? Hey, We got lost in the whispering woods and heard voices. They think we're crazy. Maybe, Max interjected, but if there's something in those woods, we can't just ignore it. What if someone else goes in there and doesn't come back? Mia sighed, the weight of their experience settling heavily on her shoulders. Okay, let's think about it. We'll talk tomorrow. For now, I just want to forget about it. With a hesitant wave, Mia slipped inside her house, leaving Max and Leo standing on the porch. The night felt different now, as if the shadows were alive, watching them with hungry eyes. Do you think it'll come back? Leo asked quietly, glancing over his shoulder at the dark outline of the whispering woods in the distance. Max shook his head, trying to dispel the chill creeping up his spine. I don't know, but I don't want to find out. As they walked home, the trees lining the street seemed to whisper among themselves, the rustling leaves echoing the haunting voices they had heard in the woods. The wind picked up, carrying faint sounds that resembled laughter, and Max couldn't help but look back one last time at the forest. In that moment, he swore he saw a flicker of movement among the trees, a shadow darting just out of sight. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he quickened his pace, not daring to look back again. The following day, the three friends met at the local library, determined to uncover more about the Whispering Woods. They combed through old newspapers and town records, searching for any mention of lost wanderers or strange occurrences. Hours passed, but their search yielded little. Most of the stories were mere folklore, tales spun to entertain children or frighten them away from the woods. But one particular article caught Max's eye, a faded piece from decades ago, recounting the mysterious disappearance of a group of teenagers who had ventured into the forest. They never found them, Max murmured, his heart sinking. Just like us? Mia leaned closer, her eyes wide. What if they heard the whispers too? What if they didn't escape? Leo frowned, a sense of unease settling over them. We have to tell someone. This is too serious to ignore. With newfound determination, they decided to approach the mayor the next day. As they left the library, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward them. The chill of the evening air sent a shiver down Max's spine. That night, as they lay in their beds, the whispers returned. Soft and insistent, they floated through the open windows, weaving into their dreams. Max tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling that the forest was calling to him, beckoning him back to its dark embrace. Max tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling that the forest was calling to him, beckoning him back to its dark embrace. The whispers grew louder in his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like tendrils of smoke. He could almost make out the words, soft, seductive, promising an understanding only the woods could give. Every creak of the floorboards beneath him felt like a reminder of the trees groaning and shifting, as though they were alive, and their presence loomed even in his dreams. He was trapped in a nightmare where the paths twisted and turned endlessly, filled with laughter that morphed into screams. The faces of the lost teenagers appeared, their eyes wide with terror as they reached out, pleading for him to join them. In the morning, he woke gasping, a cold sweat clinging to his skin. The dawn sunlight pooled in his room, pushing the shadows back momentarily, but the dread lingered. He met Leo and Mia outside, both looking equally pale and haunted. "Did you hear it too?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I thought I was just being stupid," Mia admitted, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to see the trees encroaching. But it felt so real. The whispers, she trailed off. Leo frowned, his brow furrowed. "We can't ignore what happened last night. It's like the forest has its sights set on us." They decided to visit the edge of the Whispering Woods, their curiosity tangled with fear. The air turned thick as they stepped closer, the familiar sights of their town fading into the background. The atmosphere shifted, a heaviness pressing down on them as they approached, making it hard to breathe. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if trying to grab hold of anyone who dared to enter. Shadows danced between the trunks, tricking their eyes into thinking they saw movement, a glimpse of something darting just out of reach. The laughter of the forest echoed playfully around them, sending shivers down their spines. The sunlight struggled to break through the canopy, creating flickering patterns on the ground that felt both inviting and menacing. "We shouldn't go in," Leo finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But curiosity thrummed through them, a dark pull that was hard to resist. Every nerve in Max's body screamed to turn back, yet he took a step forward, feeling the weight of the forest's gaze on him. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, wrapping around them like icy fingers. The whispers swirled more aggressively now, almost as if they were taunting them. "Stay, stay, come play." Max felt the urge to turn back increasing, but something held him in place, an intoxicating blend of fear and fascination. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something shift between the trees. A figure, pale and gaunt, standing just beyond the reach of the light. It appeared to be watching them, an unholy stillness surrounding it. Leo gasped, grabbing Mia's arm tightly. "Do you see that?" "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling as she squinted into the shadows. Max felt a chill race down his spine. The figure stepped closer, revealing a face that looked eerily familiar. It was one of the teenagers from the article they had read, a girl with wild eyes and a desperate expression that screamed for help. But beneath it all was an unsettling smile, one full of secrets that no living person should possess. With a sudden rush of panic, Mia shouted, "We have to go, now!" But as they turned to run, the trees closed in around them, their branches intertwining like skeletal hands blocking their escape. "No, let us out!" Max yelled, but the forest responded with a chorus of shrill laughter, a cacophony that drowned out his voice. The ground quaked beneath them, and the whispers turned into a roar, wrapping around their minds like a vice. "Join us, forever lost!" Fear surged through Max's veins, propelling him forward as he attempted to break free. But the ground seemed alive, roots wrapping around his ankles, pulling him back into the darkness. Desperation fueled their flight, and they shoved branches aside, feeling the rough bark scrape against their skin. The girl's laughter echoed in his ears, haunting and beckoning. "Stay with us. Come play. Don't listen." Leo shouted, the terror raw in his voice. They pushed deeper, instinct driving them to flee. Yet the forest twisted, paths shifting, as if the very land was conspiring to keep them trapped. The shadows flickered and danced around them, reality blurring with the darkness encroaching. Just when hope felt lost, Max spotted a fragment of light ahead, a ghostly glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "There!" he cried, leading Mia and Leo toward it. But as they ran, the forest roared in punishment, the whispers drowning out their breaths. "Lost, you will become one with us, forever." The air crackled with energy, a sensation that made every hair stand on end. The trees trembled with fury, branches snapping like old bones. Max felt dizzy from the chaos, each heartbeat pounding louder than the last. As they neared the light, shadows surged to block their path, dangerously close. The glow intensified, illuminating the clearing ahead, their exit. But there was something else, a dark silhouette, patient and watchful, waiting just at the fringe of the light. Max felt his heart race faster, a palpable terror gripping him. "Run!" he screamed, and they surged forward, breaking through the line of trees with all the strength left in them. The moment their feet hit the open ground, it felt like a weight had been lifted, but the sound of the forest fury echoed behind them, a promise that they wouldn't truly escape so easily. Breathless and trembling, they skidded to a halt, turning back to see the forest seething with rage. But just out of view, in the depths of the woods, the girl stood watching, her eyes shimmering with knowledge, a sinister grin on her lips. Max shuddered, knowing that while the clearing was safe for now, the whispers would never truly fade. With every sunset, as shadows lengthened, he sensed the call of the whispering woods lingering just beyond the edge of his world, waiting patiently for the moment they would return to unravel the secrets held within its dark heart. Max shuddered, knowing that while the clearing was safe for now, the whispers would never truly fade. With every sunset, as shadows lengthened. He sensed the call of the whispering woods lingering just beyond the edge of his world. Waiting patiently for the moment they would return to unravel the secrets held within its dark heart. Days slipped by, but the impact of their encounter haunted their every waking moment. They found themselves glancing toward the woods when the sun dipped low, each creak of branches setting their nerves alight. The laughter, once a distant memory, now felt like a ghostly echo, following them, prowling at the edges of their consciousness. Mia became restless, her gaze often drifting toward the horizon, drawn by an irresistible pull. "I can't stop thinking about it," she confessed one evening, her fingers twisting anxiously around the hem of her shirt. "What if we went back? Just to see?" "No," Leo snapped, the fear evident in his voice. "We can't. We might not come back this time, but what if we could find the girl?" Mia pressed, her eyes shimmering with a hope tinged with desperation. She looked lost. "Maybe we could help her." Max felt his stomach twist at the thought. The image of that gaunt face, the unsettling smile, haunted him. Maybe she doesn't want to be helped. She looked happy there, or something close to it. Their argument hung heavy in the air, but the growing darkness beyond their town seemed to whisper its insidious encouragement, urging them to explore the charms of the woods once again. After a sleepless night of conflicting thoughts, they made a pact. If the whispers returned, they would confront the forest together, no matter the cost. That very night, as the moon loomed large and full, bathing the world in eerie light, the whispers returned with a vengeance. They wound through their dreams, luring them back to the woods with the enticing promise of freedom and secrets long buried. Max awoke with a start, his heart racing, and he glanced at the other two, both of them restless and uneasy. "Are you ready?" Leo asked, the question hanging in the air like an omen. Tension crackled between them as they gathered flashlights and a few essentials. Yet as they stepped outside into the chill of the night, the stars flickered above them like unsure eyes, and the air thickened with an ominous energy. The path to the woods felt almost alive, each step an invitation, each rustle of leaves a beckoning whisper. The shadows morphed and twisted, an invitation to tread deeper into the darkness. As they stood at the edge of the trees, Max hesitated, terror gripping him. Maybe we shouldn't. But Mia and Leo took the plunge, and in his heart, he knew they would follow. A compulsion swept over him, urging him forward despite the nagging voice of reason screaming for him to retreat. The deeper the trio moved into the woods, the more they felt the life surrounding them. A pulse, a heartbeat that resonated through the ground. Max felt a strange sensation crawl across his skin, like tiny insects dancing just beneath the surface. Shadows flickered at the main edges of their lights, always just out of view, teasing the edges of his vision. The laughter came again, a low echo that sent shivers down their spines. "Can you hear it?" Mia gasped, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and terror. "It's just the wind," Leo said, but his voice wavered, betraying his unease. Then they spotted it, the clearing where they had first encountered the girl. An unsettling stillness settled over the area, more profound than before. The air was thick, almost syrupy, and a heavy mist began to creep in, coiling around their legs and rising past their knees. The familiar laughter morphed into a haunting melody, luring them deeper into the embrace of the woods. All at once, the atmosphere shifted, and Max felt a weight pressing down heavy upon him. "We should turn back," he said, the words tasting bitter as they left his lips. But Mia stepped forward, determination etched on her face. "We have to find her." Once again, Max felt pulled by an unseen force, trailing behind as the darkness wrapped around him like a cloak. They ventured further until they stumbled upon a circle of ancient stones, moss-covered and seemingly alive, humming softly with an energy that felt both inviting and foreboding. "Look at this," Mia whispered, kneeling down to touch the cold surface of a stone. It felt like a heartbeat beneath her fingertips, thrumming along with the whispers. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light illuminated the clearing, sending them all stumbling backward. Out of the light emerged the girl, her figure more corporeal than before, her smile wider, more inviting. "You came back," she said, her voice a sweet melody mixed with an undercurrent of something darker. "Are you trapped?" Max found his voice, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "No," she replied, her eyes glinting with a strange light. "I am where I belong." Then, with a flick of her hand, the laughter surged, enveloping them like a warm hug. Max's heart raced as the air electrified, the woods vibrating with anticipation. Shadows swirled closer, merging together and pulling them in all directions. "Join us," the girl said softly, her smile now tinged with something unsettling. "Feel the freedom of the forest, the whispers of eternity." Max felt the urge to scream, to break free, but his voice was lost in the cacophony that surrounded them. The shadows curdled, reaching out like dark tendrils, and Leo shouted back, panic-stricken, "Run!" But it was too late. The forest had awakened, and Max knew they had wandered too deep into its embrace. They were no longer simply lost. They were a part of its darkness now, forever entwined with whispers that would never cease. The real horror lay in knowing that they had awakened something ancient, and that the cost of their curiosity would echo through their souls for all eternity. Max felt the urge to scream, to break free, but his voice was lost in the cacophony that surrounded them. The shadows curdled, reaching out like dark tendrils, and Leo shouted back, panic-stricken, "Run!" But it was too late. The forest had awakened, and Max knew they had wandered too deep into its embrace. They were no longer simply lost. They were a part of its darkness now, forever entwined with whispers that would never cease. The real horror lay in knowing that they had awakened something ancient, and that the cost of their curiosity would echo through their souls for all eternity. As fear coursed through them, Max plunged forward without thinking. The energy in the air crackled and danced, and the ground beneath their feet felt alive. Desperate to escape the mesmerizing pull of the girl and her sinister smile, they raced toward the edge of the clearing. But every step was met with resistance, as if the earth itself was reluctant to let them go. The trees loomed closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, brushing against their skin as they slipped through. The laughter encircled them, swirling in their ears, a melody that threatened to lull them into submission. Max cast a frantic glance over his shoulder, and his heart plummeted. The girl was gone, but the shadows pulsed with her lingering essence, and her laughter echoed, fading but never disappearing completely. Just as they thought they were escaping, the ground shifted like a living entity, opening a gaping hole beneath them. They stumbled, tumbling forward as the air thickened with a stench of decay, of earth damp and rotten. The sound of rushing water greeted them, and they landed on the bank of a dark river that snaked through the forest, its surface reflecting nothing but blackness. "What is this place?" Leo gasped, scrambling to his feet. Max glanced around wildly, his mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to get away from here." In that moment, the water began to churn, bubbles rising with an unsettling grumbling sound. Then, from the depths emerged murky shapes, formless apparitions that reached slowly toward the surface, their movements deliberate and haunting. Max felt a pit of dread forming in his stomach as he began to discern faces, twisted, anguished, and pleading. They were souls trapped, their mouths moving in silent screams, eyes wide with despair. "Help us," a voice echoed, soft and breathy, yet dripping with desperation. Mia gasped, stepping back, her face pale. "We have to go," she cried, backing away from the river. But the whispers grew louder, a chorus of mournful cries that seeped into their minds. The forest itself seemed to breathe in tandem with the souls, the air thickening with sorrow. When Max looked at Leo, he saw the same wide-eyed terror reflected back at him. The river felt like a black hole, pulling them with a malevolent force, a reminder of what could happen if they dared to linger in this cursed place. "Why did we come back?" Max muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. His voice trembled, just a thread holding him together. What were we thinking? Before either could respond, the water surged violently, surging forth like a wave, and with it came a cacophony of screams. The river swelled under the moon's glow, a darkness thrumming like a heartbeat, as if it were alive and hungry. Something large shifted beneath the surface, a looming shadow that sent them both racing backward. "Run now!" Leo roared. Max didn't need to be told twice. They tore away from the water, sprinting back into the trees, branches snapping underfoot as terror propelled their every step. But the whispers pursued them, cold fingers trailing across their skin, urging them to stop, to listen, to return. As Max dashed deeper into the woods, his breath coming in frantic gasps, he caught a fleeting glimpse of the girl again, standing among the trees. This time, her smile was not just inviting. It was a promise of eternal company in the dark. Her hair danced like mist around her, and her eyes glowed with a fierce, haunting light. "Don't look at her!" Max shouted, his voice breaking as he yanked Mia's arm to redirect her gaze. They stumbled into a thick underbrush, the brush scratching at their legs. But the forest felt relentless, the very air pulsing with an energy that made every instinct scream for them to escape while they still could. With every step they took, the laughter grew louder, wrapping around them, swirling into a frenzy. It became clear that the deeper they delved into the woods, the more disoriented they became. The trees twisted in unnatural shapes, their silhouettes becoming monstrous figures that loomed over them, mocking them with their vastness. The path shifted and turned, and every time they felt they were running towards safety, they only found more darkness ahead. Max's heart raced, panic building like a dam threatening to break, and all he could think of was finding a way out before it was too late. "We need to find a landmark, something familiar," he shouted over the cacophony of sound. But just then, the earth beneath them shook violently, knocking them off balance. A deep rumble resonated from all around, making the very trees creak and groan. They fell into a hollow of low shrubs, gasping for breath, as the forest seemed to shatter and reform, creating a labyrinth of confusion. "This isn't good," Mia whimpered, looking around with wild, fearful eyes. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, whispering their names, luring them closer. And just when Max thought they were finally free, the girl appeared again, this time surrounded by shadows that moved like living smoke. "Stay with me," she said, her voice smooth and laced with temptation. She extended her hand, beckoning them forward. Max felt his heart weigh heavy in his chest. The allure was unbearable, but deep down, he knew that accepting would mean surrendering to a fate worse than death. "Don't listen," he screamed, but the whispers drowned him out, wrapping around his thoughts like tendrils of darkness, blurring the lines of reality and sucking them in deeper. "Come play with us forever." Max grabbed Leo and Mia, dragging them away with every ounce of strength he had left, pushing through the suffocating fog of despair that filled the space around them. But the girl's laughter echoed in his mind, intertwining with the horrific visions still rooted in the depths of those haunted waters. They stumbled into yet another clearing, but this one felt different. This one pulsed with malevolent energy. The trees here seemed to lean in, their branches contorting like monstrous arms, as if the forest itself was preparing to consume them whole. Max could feel despair washing over him, sense a darkness rising up and enveloping them. Panic-stricken, he realized that no matter how far they ran, the woods seemed to close in around them, trapping them in a web of unspeakable horrors, a prison of whispers that would either consume their souls or offer them as sacrifices to the insatiable darkness. They were losing the battle against the call of the forest, and Max could only wonder how much longer they could resist the whispers urging them to submit, to join the very shadows and become a part of that eternal nightmare. They were losing the battle against the call of the forest, and Max could only wonder how much longer they could resist the whispers urging them to submit, to join the very shadows and become a part of that eternal nightmare. Suddenly, in the midst of their escape, the ground wrenched beneath them again, but this time it felt intentional, as if the very earth was alive, and aware of their vulnerability. The trees around them seemed to groan and creep closer, the branches curling inwards like fingers ready to snatch them back into the dark. "Mia, look out!" Leo shouted just as a thick, knotted root whipped out from the ground, snagging her ankle. She cried out, falling hard onto the forest floor. "Help!" she yelled, fingers clawing desperately at the ground as the root twisted tighter, pulling her toward the earth. Max lunged forward, grabbing her hands, but the force felt insurmountable. The laughter of the girl rang in their ears, mocking in its sweetness, as if the very forest was reveling in their terror. "Let her go!" Max shouted, taking everything he had left to yank at the root. His fingers slipped on moist earth, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The shadows around them fluttered like living curtains, closing in, and he could feel the chilling pull of something ancient stirring in the depths of the woods. It wanted them, not just their fear, but their very souls. "Max, please!" Mia's voice twisted into a frantic cry, her eyes wide with panic. With sheer determination, he pulled harder, and for a moment, it seemed as if he might succeed. The root released, jerking Mia free. She tumbled into his arms, but the moment was fleeting. The laughter surged louder, drowning out the sound of their own racing hearts. "Run!" he yelled, the noise igniting something primal within them, and they took off again, leaving behind the echoes of the girl's haunting voice. But the forest wasn't done with them yet. As they fled, the trees warped into grotesque shapes, branches snagging at their clothes, pulling them back into the darkness they so desperately tried to escape. Max could feel something cold and damp brushing against his skin, almost like fingers trailing along his back, guiding him deeper into the abyss. He swatted away at the shadows, fear bubbling in his chest as he turned to look at Mia and Leo. Their faces were twisted with terror, and as they pushed forward, the path ahead shimmered ominously. Each step taken felt like a step closer to something unfathomable. Just ahead, Max spotted a flicker of light, a weak glow pulsating like a heartbeat. It drew him in with a strange magnetic pull, but he hesitated. The darkness surrounding them swirled with uncertainty. "Is it safe?" Mia gasped, her voice barely a whisper over the rustling of leaves. "Maybe it's a way out," he replied, unsure but refusing to let fear dictate their choices any longer. He grabbed their hands, hoping to pull them toward the light, but the shadows loomed ever larger, writhing, coiling around them. As they neared the glow, the trees parted to reveal a small circle bathed in an eerie, silvery luminescence. But as they stepped into the light, the temperature dropped, and a chill crawled down Max's spine. The feeling of being watched thickened the air, suffocating in its intensity. In the center of the circle lay a stone altar, covered in strange carvings that seemed to shift and twist like living things. Blood-red moss clung to the surface, and whispering figures danced at the periphery, hinting at their ancient purpose. "Stay together," Leo whispered, a tremor in his voice. Suddenly, the shadows surged, swirling into a spiraling vortex that howled around them. Max felt as if the very ground trembled in anticipation. It was as if the forest had been waiting for this moment, keen to drag them back into its depths. With wide eyes, they watched as from the base of the altar, something began to rise. A figure formed, draped in shadows, slowly taking shape before them. The girl appeared again, her eyes gleaming mischievously, but this time she was accompanied by more twisted shapes, wraith-like beings. They glided effortlessly, their features obscured, yet Max could sense their hunger, a deep, insatiable need woven in the very fabric of their existence. "Don't you understand?" the girl sang, her voice a chilling melody that wove through the air. "You belong here with us. The forest knows you. It calls to you." Mia shivered and tightened her grip on Max's arm, drawing him closer. "We need to go back. We need to leave." But the girl only smiled, her expression a disturbing combination of innocence and malevolence. "You have come too far to turn back. Your footprints will remain here forever, and soon you will join the choir of whispers." The shadows surged closer, circling them in a tight formation, fusing with the forest, becoming a part of it, and the whispering grew to a crescendo, drowning out all thought, pulling at their senses. Darkness seeped into the glimmer of light, dimming its glow. Max could feel his heart in his throat, the weight of despair draping over him like a shroud. There was no running from this. The forest had etched its name on their souls, and the price of their curiosity surged to the surface, its call undeniable. With a sudden burst of defiance, Max shouted, "We are not yours. We can leave." But as soon as the words escaped his lips, the figures faltered, and the girl's laughter turned cold and hollow. The shadows paused, momentarily distracted, as though the very notion of defiance had triggered something deep within the forest. The girl's smile faded, replaced by a mask of fury, eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "You think you can resist? You think you can escape?" Before he could respond, the darkness erupted, and the forest walls began to tremble, vibrating with anger. The altar pulsed as if it were alive, and the ground buckled beneath their feet. The whispers intensified, echoing their fears and failures in a twisted symphony. Desperation clawed at Max's insides, and he turned to Leo and Mia, pleading with unspoken words. "We stick together, no matter what." But the shadows seemed to taste their fear, growing thicker, enveloping the clearing in an impenetrable cloak of darkness. The last remnants of light dimmed until they were enveloped in an endless void, and every sense screamed at them to run. Even though they knew deep down, the forest had already claimed them as its own. They could no longer determine if they were moving forward or spinning helplessly in an endless loop of despair. The figures danced closer, their whispers merging into a maddening chant that reverberated like thunder in their minds. Join us, forever." As the tendrils of shadow reached for them, tightening like a noose, Max felt the ground beneath him give way, as if the forest was opening its jaws to swallow them whole. "We can't give in," he shouted, his voice breaking with raw emotion. But even as he said it, the pull of the darkness was like a dangerous melody calling them home, beckoning them into its depths. The echoes of the girls' laughter faded, replaced by a sinister quiet, as if the forest was anticipating the moment of their surrender. No matter how far they ran, they were hopelessly intertwined with the horrors that lurked beyond the trees. The ancient spirits of the forest patiently awaited their descent into the abyss, ready to welcome them into a nightmare that would haunt them for all eternity. No matter how far they ran, they were hopelessly intertwined with the horrors that lurked beyond the trees. The ancient spirits of the forest patiently awaited their descent into the abyss, ready to welcome them into a nightmare that would haunt them for all eternity. The eerie silence grew thicker, oppressive, squeezing the breath from their lungs as they spun in spirals of uncertainty. Max could feel the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, a dark heartbeat echoing the frantic rhythm of his heart. Each thump resonated through him, reminding him that the forest was alive with intentions, hungry for their fear like a predator stalks its prey. Suddenly, a chilling windswept howl cut through the stillness, sending a cascade of leaves swirling into a rage around them. The ground beneath them churned, forming twisted shapes, as if demons were awakening from their slumber within the very soil. Eyes wide with panic, Max grabbed Mia and Leo, pulling them close as he felt the air shimmer with dangerous energy, twisting his stomach into knots. "Over there," Leo pointed, his voice barely a whisper as he motioned toward a narrow path that sliced through the trees, the only break in the horrifying chaos. Max nodded, and they rushed forward, their feet pounding the earth, desperation lending them speed. But the shadows pursued relentlessly, merging into a dark tempest, and Max felt the breath of something cold and elusive flick against the nape of his neck. "Don't look back," he shouted, his own voice barely managing to rise above the tempest. "Keep running." As they pushed deeper into the woods, the path narrowed, becoming choked with twisting roots and overgrown vines that seemed to reach for them like skeletal fingers. Off to the side, the woods pulsed with a life of their own, shadows flickering in shapes that hinted at tortured souls, trapped forever in the grasp of the forest's curse. The trees groaned under the weight of ancient memories, and every rustle felt like whispered secrets from long-forgotten tragedies. Then, without warning, the ground buckled beneath Leo, sending him sprawling into the underbrush. A thick mist began to rise around them, cradling him in its cold embrace. Max and Mia halted, horror-stricken as Leo's hand clawed at the damp earth. Terror etched across his features. "Help me," he gasped, eyes wide, reflecting the ghastly purity of fear. "I've got you," Max shouted, plunging forward as Mia fell to her knees beside Leo, grasping his wrist with both hands. But as they struggled to pull him back, the shadows coiled tighter around Leo's legs, latching onto him like eager leeches, pulling him deeper into the murky depths of the forest wilderness. Max felt the weight of despair settle in the pit of his stomach as the shadows wove their dark magic, making Leo writhe in panic as he began to sink, engulfed by the forest. "No, not like this," Max exclaimed, his voice cracking, fighting against the creeping dread that clawed at his heart. Together, they yanked and pulled, muscles screaming, adrenaline pumping through their veins, but the pull of the dark was insatiable. Through gritted teeth, Max glanced at Mia. "We can't let him go. I won't lose him." With that fierce conviction, Max closed his eyes, summoning every ounce of strength and willpower he had left. "You'll get through this, Leo. We won't let you go. Fight." But Leo trembled, his eyes all but consumed with the shadows, terror flickering and wavering in his expression. The sinister laughter filled the air again, mocking their desperate attempts, the sound almost musical in its eeriness. Beyond Leo's struggles, the figures of the lost souls materialized in the fog, their hollow eyes mirroring the despair within the shadows. They glided towards them, beckoning invitingly, drawn to the fear that radiated from the three of them like smoke from a flame. A chorus of whispers enveloped them, seeping into their minds, promising liberation from their torment, the ultimate escape into the dark. "Join us," the whispers lured, a seductive blend of sounds that could choke the bravest hearts. "Stay with us. You don't have to fear anymore." Mia's grip on Leo's wrist faltered for just a moment, the allure of the murky depths clawing at her sanity. In that fleeting moment, the temptation to surrender nearly overwhelmed Max, but the sound of Leo's terrified breaths broke through the haze. "Focus," he shouted, pulling with all his might, channeling every ounce of energy, his body trembling with the strain. Then, with a sudden burst, they yanked Leo free, toppling backwards as Mia rolled to the side, their breaths coming in frantic gasps. But getting Leo back was only the beginning of the fight. As they scrambled to their feet, the fog shifted, distorting the air before them. The dark figures melted back into the trees, reforming as the girl once more stopped them, blocking their path. "You think you can escape?" Her voice echoed with an otherworldly resonance, punctuated by the expansion of the shadows around them. The atmosphere thickened, pressing down with an unbearable weight, and just behind her, the forest shuddered as branches swayed like arms eager to reach out and capture them once more. "We don't have to do this," Max shouted, desperation infusing his voice. "We can just leave." At that statement, the girl threw back her head, laughter bursting forth like jagged shards of glass, echoing through the trees. "Leave? You're part of this now. You will never leave. Any of you." The darkness surged forward, tendrils stretching out, grasping at them, attempting to snatch the warmth from their skin as it wrapped around them. Max felt a freezing touch reach his chest, squeezing harder as if trying to extinguish the light that lingered in his heart. Mia clawed at the mist, trying to ward off the encroaching shadows, her voice cracking under pressure. "We'll find a way," she gasped, her eyes darting around frantically, searching for escape. Suddenly, with a sheer spark of defiance, Max stepped forward, his heart racing against the tide of hopelessness that clawed its way into his mind. "We are not scared of you. We will find our way back." As if in response, the shadows recoiled momentarily, rippling away from him, creating a brief shimmer of light that sliced through the gloom. It opened like a shimmering portal to the past, revealing glimpses of joy, laughter, and memories that had been drained from the forest. Human experiences that whispered tales of resilience and survival. With that glimmer in his gaze, Max took another step forward. We might be lost, but we are not powerless. You can't have us. The forest trembled at his words, tension building as the girl stared at him, her eyes narrowing with malice. The shadows shivered slightly, as if the very essence of fear within them had shifted, rattled by an unexpected response. In that instant, Max knew that if they could stand firm together in the face of this darkness, if they could reclaim their strength, maybe, just maybe, the forest would release its grip on them. He turned to Mia and Leo, urgency igniting in his chest. Stay with me? We beat this together. Taking their hands, they formed a circle, hearts racing as they focused on the light flickering in the darkness. Their shared hope, the bonds of friendship, warmed from their memories fueling their resolve. As they stood united, the shadows began to squirm, sensing the shift in power. The tendrils recoiled again, and Max felt the pull of the forest weakening slightly, like a predator sensing its prey had turned the tables. Together, Max cried out, squeezing Mia and Leo's hands tightly. Together, we fight. As they echoed the words, the light in their center erupted, glowing brighter, scattering the shadows like mist upon a breeze. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and the forest shrieked in disbelief, twisting with fury. The girl faltered, her smile faltering into an expression of venomous rage. With each passing second, it felt as if the darkness began to fray, weakening against their united front. The trees shivered and groaned, rattling under the pressure of their determination. Around them, the oppressive whispers shrieked in abject fury as Max, Mia, and Leo pressed forward, pushing against the foreboding shadows that had loomed over them for so long. Together, they chanted as one, forming an unbreakable bond of defiance, standing united against the darkness. A surge of light emanated from them, and in that moment, the ancient curse of the forest seemed to falter. But just as victory felt within reach, the ground erupted, and from the depths, claws of darkness surged, snatching at their ankles, threatening to undo everything they fought for. Max's heart pounded as he struggled against the tightening grip of shadows clawing ever closer. All he could do was hold on to his friends and pray that the light they formed together would stay strong enough to push them through this suffocating nightmare. Stay with me, he shouted, forcing the words through gritted teeth, sensing the shadows coiling tighter, their hunger almost palpable. The moment was poised on a precipice, a struggle against an unfathomable power. The shadows weren't ready to let them go, not yet. They would fight, they would resist, hell or high water. They would not become part of the forest's dreadful legacy. As the shadows lunged, Max knew they had to change the rule of the game. They had to forge their own path, to turn the darkness into light. The souls trapped in the forest cried out, caught in the battle between light and shadow, urging them forward, begging for salvation. In these moments, courage bloomed in their hearts. There was no backing down, not anymore. As the shadows lunged, Max felt a flicker of determination swell within him. He would not let them take Leo, would not let these dark forces consume their souls. He released Mia's hand just long enough to reach into his pocket, fingers brushing against a small token, a silver compass, its surface worn and dulled by time. Focus on the light, he urged, gripping the compass tightly. We gotta find our way out. Mia and Leo nodded, their faces pale and drawn, but their resolve was growing with every heartbeat. The forest felt alive, branches twisting and shivering, whispering warnings as they advanced. The air around them thickened. The shadows seemed to congeal, swirling like a storm waiting to unleash its wrath. A low moan crept through the trees, a tortured sound that echoed through the gloom, making their skin crawl. The very earth beneath them felt unstable, alive with a restless hunger, and for a moment, Max thought he saw eyes blinking within the bark, watching, waiting. Keep going, Mia shouted, forcing herself to move despite the loss of energy that threatened to drag her down. "Don't look at the trees." But the girl stepped closer, her shadow stretching over them like a shroud. "You're never getting away," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "You belong to the forest. You always have." Max gritted his teeth, forcing himself to look not at her, but at Leo. "You're not alone. Just hold on." The tendrils of darkness surged, coiling around Max's ankles like serpent tails, dragging him down inch by inch. A chilling weight wrapped around his heart. He could feel the cold creeping in, fingers of ice crawling up his legs, slipping through the fabric of reality. It was only a matter of time before the fear began to take root, feeding the shadows that flitted around them. "Fight it!" Leo yelled, struggling against the pole, his breaths coming in frantic gasps. "We have to push through together." The chilling laughter rang out once more, echoing through the twisted forms of the trees. The forest was alive with the sounds of its victims, the whispers of those who had been ensnared before. Max staggered, feeling the weight of despair wash over him. And in that moment, the faces began to materialize, a cacophony of lost souls, eyes hollow and mouths twisted in silent screams. "Help us! Join us!" They sighed, their spectral hands reaching through the shadows, as if their pain was a tangible thing. Max's heart raced, each thud echoing in the hollow of his chest. "No, we're not lost. We're not yours." With each shout, a pulse of light expanded from them, pushing the shadows back like waves receding from the shore. But just as hope began to swell, a gust of wind howled through the trees, whipping branches together with a crack like thunder, and the girl's eyes lit with a sinister glow. "Foolish children," she spat, her hand raised, and the darkness rushed forward like a living tide, stretching, clawing, and grasping towards them. The mist thickened, curling up into dense tendrils that wrapped around their arms and necks, squeezing tighter, making it harder to breathe. Shadows danced at the corners of their vision, pulling them apart, one at a time. For every inch they managed to push back, the forest roared in vengeance, retaliating with a violence that made the ground shake beneath their feet. "Max!" Mia screamed, the darkness pulling her away. Her face contorted with fear as the shadows sought to pull her into their depths, whispering promises of solace. "Help me!" It was a nightmare, the forest becoming a living prison around them. Max felt himself shaking, an icy grip of terror constricting his chest. Desperation surged anew as he lunged, reaching for Mia, but the shadows lashed out, catching him off guard. The boy stumbled as the ground seemed to shift beneath him, and as he fell, reality warped. Something cold and damp coiled around his wrist and pulled him down into the depths. With every fiber of his being, Max fought against the grip of despair, emotions warring within him. He thought of sunny days, of laughter, moments that framed their friendship while the ghastly silhouettes of the forest twisted into darker shapes around him. "Get away from her," he roared, summoning every ounce of strength, pushing against the overwhelming sense of dread that gnawed at his sanity. Just like that, something deep inside him ignited, and the compass flared alive in his pocket, throwing back the shadows momentarily. "Light!" he shouted, gathering the group around him as they formed a protective circle. "Stay together!" With a united front, they pressed forward, the flickering light shocking the shadows, driving them back enough to create a narrow path through the thick fog that slithered around their feet. For every step they took, the forest seemed to convulse in anger, branches snapping and cracking with a furious energy, the very air thick with malice. But they kept moving, fueled by the strength found in their shared resolve, a bond unbreakable, the light flickering brighter with their sheer will. The shadows shrieked in dismay, clawing at their backs, trying to pull them apart. But the three clung to each other, hearts pounding with an unyielding faith. "Look for the light," Max urged, adrenaline coursing through him. "We got to break through." The girl's eyes shone with determination, the sudden burst of hope igniting something deep within. They surged forward, the compass guiding them like a beacon through the pervasive darkness, illuminating paths with newfound energy, revealing the dense underbrush ahead. As they bolted through the shadows, the forest howled in rage, but now it felt desperate, as if it was being unraveled by their combined strength. The trees moaned and creaked, their trunks swaying dangerously, threatening to collapse inward like a tightening noose. Max pushed ahead, glancing back only briefly to see Leo casting furtive glances over his shoulder, eyes wide with terror. Mia's determination shone through the gloom, a flicker of light battling against the enveloping darkness. Suddenly, the ground quaked violently beneath them, a churning rumble that threatened to swallow them whole. Max stumbled, nearly losing his footing as branches lashed out like striking snakes, trying to ensnare them once more. There's a clearing ahead, Mia shouted, breathless with urgency, pointing to a faint glow filtering through the gnarly trees. With renewed vigor, they charged toward it, the promise of light ahead spurring them on as the shadows clawed fiercely at their heels, desperate to reclaim their prize. But with every step toward freedom, the forest's wrath grew. The dark girl appeared before them again, blocking the exit, her presence radiating fury. "You think light can save you," she rasped, the air thickening with a sinister force. "You will never leave. This is your home now." Trapped in a noose of shadow and despair, Max felt the walls closing in. The shadowy tendrils gathered strength, a pulsating mass of darkness clawing desperately to engulf them. "No," he hollered, every ounce of his being fueling his voice as he challenged the encroaching darkness. "We are stronger than you think." And as they stood before the girl, that glimmer of hope ignited within them. Together, they unleashed the power of their bond, focusing on the brightness and warmth they carried within their hearts, shining brighter than the darkest night. With a collective breath, they unleashed the light, a dazzling flare that shot forth like the sun breaking through the blackest storm, spreading warmth through the cold, clammy air of the forest. And as the light spread through the shadows, the darkness shrieked, writhing in agony as the tendrils began to recede. But just when victory felt within reach, a tremor shot through the ground, and a chilling voice echoed through the trees, whispering promises that sank deep into their minds. "Run," the voices echoed, hissing like a haunting lullaby. "Join us." But together, they stood firm, refusing to bend or break against the suffocating darkness, holding on to their shared humanity as the chaos roared around them. The forest would not take them. They would push back. They would battle this nightmare together, breaking the hold that sought to ensnare their souls forever. With that fierce resolve, they dove deeper into the light, the fingers of shadow clawing and grasping. But Max knew they would fight to the end, to reclaim what the darkness desired most, their freedom. As they surged forward, the light they summoned flickered against the oppressive weight of the forest, illuminating the twisted roots and underbrush that seemed to reach for them with claw-like fingers. The place had a life of its own, drowning in a thick blanket of fog that obscured the way ahead, wrapping around them like a shroud of despair. Every step felt heavier, an invisible force trying to drag them back into the depths. Max could hear the whispers grow louder, a cacophony of voices echoing off the trees, each one twisting into mocking laughter, calling out to every doubt hiding within his heart. "Join us," they crooned, almost soothingly, yet layered with intense malice. "You can't escape the inevitable." Leo shook his head, teeth clenched as he drew his attention to the path ahead. "Ignore them. We have to stick together. They want to tear us apart." Yet the forest conspired against them, branches waving as if alive, casting eerie shadows that contorted into nightmarish shapes. Faces crying out, eyes glimmering with fear, mouths twisted as if trying to scream without sound. The air crackled with tension, and Max felt like he was losing grip on reality, the line between fear and clarity blurring with every heartbeat. Suddenly, Mia let out a choked gasp, pointing toward a clearing ahead that pulsated faintly with light. "I see it. Come on." But as they rushed toward that faint glimmer, the ground shook violently, revealing roots that snaked upward, grasping for their feet like skeletal hands. Each root curled tighter, pulling at their ankles, wanting to drag them down into the cold, moist earth. Max stumbled but regained his balance, his heart pounding like a war drum. "Don't look back! We have to trust the light," he shouted, channeling every ounce of courage he could muster into those words. An ear-piercing wail pierced the silence, the dark girl standing once more in their path, her silhouette framed by the ethereal glow of the clearing behind her. Her eyes burned with hatred and sorrow, and for a moment, Max saw visions of lost souls swirling behind her. "You think you can leave?" she shrieked, voice echoing like thunder through the trees. "You are already ours." The shadows around her thickened, swirling with a malevolent energy, as if the very fog was rising to defend her claim. Max felt a chill creep up his spine. A deep-rooted fear told him they were grievously outmatched, yet he could not allow it to show. With renewed resolve, he took Mia's hand and urged Leo forward, bolting towards the glow. The darkness clawed after them, a wave of fury, but perhaps it was that flicker of light that gave them strength as they finally pressed through the barrier of shadows. Reaching the final obstruction, they dashed into the clearing, but relief was brief. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air grew still and heavy. A hush fell around them, as if the very forest were holding its breath, waiting. Before them lay an ancient stone altar, gnarled and twisted, overrun by ivy and creeping vines, eerily pulsing like a heartbeat. At the center lay small offerings, bones, trinkets, memories of those who had wandered into this cursed place and never returned. "Max!" Leo's voice trembled, eyes wide with horror. "What is this?" Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper, as she slowly stepped toward the altar. The moment her foot touched the ground before the stones, the whispers shifted to a frenzied frenzy, a maelstrom of voices drowning her out. "Feed us! Sacrifice! Join us for eternity!" they cried, a maddening chorus that clawed at their sanity. The ground trembled again, and jagged cracks began to form, trickles of shadow seeping through. It was as if the very earth protested their intrusion, an ominous warning resonating in the pit of Max's stomach. Suddenly, Leo screamed as the shadows surged, wrapping around him faster than he could react, pulling him back toward the forest's grasp. "Help!" he pleaded, terror etched across his face as he fought against the dark tendrils, but they pulled with unyielding strength. "Leo!" Mia cried out, lunging forward, but as she reached for him, the shadows lunged too, snatching at her feet, eager to reclaim its grip. Max couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let them take his friends. Summoning every scrap of courage and confusion within him, he thrust the compass forward, its silver gleam reflecting the dim light, hoping to create a barrier against the encroaching darkness. "No, you won't take them. Not today." The compass pulsed with a blinding energy, the light expanding and consuming the suffocating darkness for just a heartbeat. Enough for him to dive toward Leo, gripping his wrist tightly. "Hold on!" Max shouted as the shadows shrieked, the sound reverberating through the clearing like thunder. But the pulse faded just as quickly as it came, and the darkness lashed out, frantic to reclaim its prize. As Leo's hand slipped from his grip, confusion swirled in Max's mind. Panic clawed at his chest as all around them, the forest raged, branches snapping, roots thrashing violently, the clearing now an arena of chaos. "Get out!" Leo screamed, but even in that moment, Max could feel despair like ice creeping into their hearts, the shadows still eager to break the bonds of their friendship. "No!" Max shouted, fighting back against the enveloping darkness. "We're stronger than this." The light rippled around them, illuminating their faces as shadows clawed and scraped. Max's heart thundered in his ears, every instinct screaming to run, to hide from the figures emerging from the dark. But he couldn't, not without his friends. With a final exhale, he turned and instinctively drew close to the altar. The moment he did, the silent air trembled, almost acknowledging his presence. Suddenly, he felt a rush of energy surge through him, a communication beyond words whispering through his veins, calling for unity, a fight against the chaos surrounding them. "Do you feel that?" he gasped. It's the light. It's inside us." Mia nodded, a fierce spark igniting in her eyes. "We can channel it together." "For Leo." The shadows quivered at the sudden upsurge of hope, recoiling as if stung by the light that poured from their hearts. They mustered their strength, forming a circle around the altar, hand in hand as they embraced the pulse of light inside. It was not easy. The tendrils around them surged and struck with whip-like ferocity, but they held on tighter, anchored in their resolve. Together, they channeled that force, pushing back against the dark entities desperately stealing toward the altar. And as the light erupted like dawn breaking over a long night, the shadows howled in fury, retreating. But that was only the beginning. As they stood firm, the air thickened with crackling energy, the stone altar shifted, and the very bones and offerings that lay scattered began to stir, awakening. The remnants of those forever lost shifted and writhed beneath the surface, their faces hauntingly familiar, yet broken, invoking a dread that sent chills down Max's spine. "No," he shouted, but it was too late. The veil between worlds had been breached, an unholy gateway unleashing horrors bound long ago. There were faces now, twisted and sorrowful, peering through the cracks of darkness. Max couldn't comprehend the horror. He found himself enveloped in their anguish, feeling their despair seep into his bones, urging him to succumb, to join them in their endless plight. "Turn back! Fight it!" Max yelled, his voice strained but resolute. As the boundary thinned, a figure stepped through, a darker silhouette of the girl they faced earlier, now fully formed from the shadows, eyes glowing fiercely in the twilight. "You have awakened them. Now, you shall serve what you have disturbed." The shadows coalesced around her, swirling, gaping mouths forming within, stretching wide to consume the last remnants of light. With every fiber in his body screaming to flee, Max faced the encroaching darkness, their breaths rapid and erratic, hearts pounding in unison. They had come too far to turn back, and the unity they forged now felt like an unbreakable thread that bound them against the chaos. "It's us against them," he shouted, clenching his jaw. "Together." And in that desperate moment, as the shadows howled for dominion, a surge of warmth ignited within, an instinctual realization that they could draw forth a might greater, tapping into the ancient power lingering just beneath the surface, within the relics of the forest itself. Nothing could prepare them for what fully lay ahead. But in the heart of that clearing, they became more than just friends. They were warriors, defenders of the light, standing ready to confront the terrors birthed from shadows, emboldened by an unyielding bond. They were warriors, defenders of the light, standing ready to confront the terrors birthed from shadows, emboldened by an unyielding bond. As the darkness writhed, tendrils reaching out like serpents, Max felt a pulse deep within the earth, resonating with the energy of the altar. It was as if the very ground beneath them beckoned, urging them to draw from its strength. They locked eyes, understanding what had to be done, the gravity of their fight sinking into their bones. Mia stepped forward, lifting her chin defiantly as bright light began to pulse around them. "We're not scared of you," she declared, her voice cutting through the cacophony of whispers. "We know what you are. You can't claim us." The girl made of shadows snarled, her mouth twisting into a grotesque rictus. "Foolish children, you think you can defy the darkness," she hissed, lunging toward them, her form shifting and rippling like a wave. "You will be consumed, just like the rest." Max tightened his grip on Mia and Leo. "Together," he shouted, pushing every ounce of light and warmth through their hands. The air around them shimmered, energy coiling and weaving, brightening with every shared heartbeat. That warmth billowed outward, clashing harshly against the cold, grasping shadows. As they focused their resolve, the light exploded outward, cascading like molten gold in the dark, illuminating the twisted figures that emerged from the cracks in the ground. Faces thin and gaunt, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Max's heart dropped as he recognized them. Faces of those who had been lost long ago, people whispered about in hushed tones. They lingered just beyond the shadows, trapped between worlds, caught in the web of despair that had ensnared them. The sight chilled him, the truth settling like ice in his veins. "Help us," one voice cried out, breaking through the cacophony. It was a soft, shuddering wail, as if the very breath of sorrow hung in the air, echoing around them. "Free us from this torment." Max's hand tightened around the compass as he struggled not to waver. The light they conjured pulsed stronger, but it was met with defiance as the shadows retaliated, and violent shudders coursed through the ground. The altar shook beneath them, and with each tremor, the figures grew more desperate, their silhouettes clawing at reality as if trying to reach out and grasp hold of salvation. Leo's face paled, and he stumbled back, fear clawing at him. "We can't help them. Look at them. They're twisted." But there was a spark of determination in his eyes that hadn't disappeared completely. Mia stepped forward again, driven by empathy. "We can't abandon them. We're stronger when we unite," she exclaimed fiercely, her voice unwavering. "We can't turn our backs on their suffering. We're here to fight." Suddenly, a horrible shriek cut through the air, shaking the very trees around them. The shadows writhed and contorted, merging into a monstrous shape, the air thick with the overwhelming scent of decay. Tendrils lashed out violently, gnashing at their feet, pulling them closer to the altar, insisting, "Bow before that which belongs to the dark. Embrace despair." The trees around them began to twist, their bark gnarled and splintered, branches stretching and moving longer, almost reaching out toward them. It was as if the forest itself was alive, participating in the horror, misery gathering strength like a storm brewing anew. The sound of crackling branches mimicked toothy grins, shadows darting behind every trunk, hidden but ever watchful. Max fought against the onslaught of terror rising within him. "No, we won't give in," he barked, pulling the others close as they formed a protective circle around one another. They could feel the energy spilling out between them, a warmth that wouldn't ebb away, yet it felt like fighting against a rising tide of ghosts. Then, without warning, the earth beneath them trembled violently, and the once solid ground gave way to blackness, an abyss threatening to swallow them whole. The shadows began to swirl beneath their feet, thick as oil, bubbling with unseen lives, darkened whispers echoing their names, taunting them with the promise of eternal sleep. In that moment of chaos, something shifted within the darkness, a pulse of recognition that surged between the lost faces and the children standing resolutely against the tide. The spectral forms began reaching out toward Max, Mia, and Leo, their fingers barely brushing the light emanating from the altar. "Help us," they cried again, desperation palpable in their voices. "Release us. No more pain." The encroaching shadows roiled, shrinking back as the combined light energy brightened, swirling and pulsing like a living entity, as if it were a heartbeat echoing within the frightened chamber of the woods. Max closed his eyes and concentrated harder than ever, each heartbeat sinking to the flow of light and shadow, every breath a testament of defiance against the darkness. "We can save them," he shouted, addressing the others, knowing this was their only chance. Courage mingling with fear, they united in purpose, chanting words that resonated from deep within the ground, ancient and sacred beckoning for liberation. Light spiraled outward, tendrils grasping at the lost souls trapped in despair, weaving a pathway to freedom. The shadows screamed in rage as the altar radiated stronger, a beacon piercing through the fog, and the cracking of space itself whispered tales of hope. Yet, the dark girl lashed out, her form undulating, swirling into a mass of horror, grotesque and shifting, shadows morphing into monstrous shapes that reached toward them like claws. "You cannot save them," she shrieked, the very sound clawing at their sanity. "They belong to me, not today." Max shouted back, fire igniting in his chest as the light blazed, bright and unyielding. cutting through the darkness like a blade. They could do this. They could save the lost souls and push back against the unbearable weight of despair. But as the shadows stumbled, recoiling from the onslaught, the ground beneath them continued to shake, and roots lunged like alligators, snatching at their ankles. Max felt his footing tremble, nearly losing his balance as the girl's wrath crescendoed, and the world around them appeared to spin violently. "Hold on! Don't let go!" Leo yelled, struggling to stay upright as dark figures darted beneath their feet, whispering words tangled with sorrow and darkness, a heavy fog threatening to drown them all. But in that moment, focus strengthened, and the trio pushed through the cacophony, their voices ringing out, filled with light and resolve. "We'll set you free. You will not suffer," they cried as one, the harmony of their voices merging into a force palpable around them. Colors emerged, their skin glimmering, opalescent, draped in light and warmth, swirling above them in a radiant display that mingled with the shadowy darkness, igniting a struggle as if dawn were breaking against the night. The shadows began to twist and shriek, a violent dance with the light, contorting into shapes that faced the depth of their fears. Max felt the energy dismantling the tight grip of terror enveloping him. It surged, filling him up, and he would not back down. "We are not afraid," he called defiantly, and in that proclamation, the altar erupted with brilliant, blinding radiance. The shadows recoiled, wailing in agony as if the light itself bore the weight of their dismay, returning now to the kind of awareness that thrived within them. "We can't let them win," Mia shouted, her voice a rallying cry swelling against the dark, and a sudden realization gripped them. They had the power to break the cycle of despair. As the light coated each of them, they charged toward the heart of shadows, where the dark girl stood unwavering, aiming to claim her prize. Each step felt like a drumbeat of resolve, their hearts and bravado sinking to a rhythm that felt unyielding. The world around them screamed, the trees shaking as if fighting against a storm. Yet in that rather than falter, their unity ignited a blaze, a tendril of warmth leaping from each of them as they surged toward their foe. "Take this!" Max shouted, unleashing every feeling, every doubt transformed into light, as they propelled it forward like a spear aimed at the shadow heart. The dark girl wailed, a primal sound, echoing off the trees, and in a burst of splendor, the shadows exploded. The figures of the lost souls erupted into radiant streams of light, rising high into the air, shattering the oppressive weight that had withheld them for too long. In that moment, hope became tangible, swirling flames erupting in the clearing, illuminating the twisted roots and hunched trees, sending the echoes of the dark world spiraling backward until they screamed, frightened, fleeing into the depths of the forest. And as the light continued to swirl, wrapping around the altar and embracing them, all that darkness, that misery, that fear pushed back into the abyss. Max knew they weren't merely fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every lost soul, every flicker of hope trapped amidst the chaos. The gentle sounds of the forest, once heavy with whispers of doom, transformed, and notes of freedom became the new chorus. Laughter rang like wind chimes, sweet and ethereal, weaving between the trees as the morning light broke through branches, soft and warm. But in that entrenched brightness, Max's heart remained vigilant, aware that even in victory, shadows lingered, and they had merely cracked open a veil, a tiny chasm that revealed more darkness yet to confront. Determination coursed through his veins. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. With a newfound hope buoying their spirits, they took a collective breath, preparing for whatever lay ahead, ready to face whatever dark secrets still lurked within the forest shadows. Max's heart raced, an unending thrum that echoed through the stillness as they stood together amidst the remnants of the battle. The forest was alive, breathing with a strange energy, and the air felt electric. Yet, beneath that charged atmosphere, an unsettling feeling crawled along his spine. The shadows that had retreated were not gone. They lingered, whispering on the edges of his consciousness, speaking secrets he could barely grasp. They turned away from the altar, the dead leaves crunching underfoot, and ventured deeper into the woods. The trees twisted higher above them, their gnarled branches reaching down like skeletal fingers, retreating from the brightness they carried. A chill crept in, swirling like a fog, wrapping around Max, Mia, and Leo, clinging to them with an eagerness that felt almost sentient. "Did you guys hear that?" Leo asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. There was an edge of fear to his tone, the kind that made Max's pulse quicken. "Hear what?" Mia replied, her eyes darting to the thick curtain of trees cloaked in shadows. Silence enveloped them, heavy and ominous. It felt as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Yet, just beyond that silence, something stirred, low and mocking, a distant voice that taunted them. They pressed on, guided by a faint path illuminated by the waning light, but it felt like the woods were closing in on them, hungrily watching with unseen eyes. The remnants of their victory flickered in and out like a dying flame, and the shadows crept slowly back, weaving between the underbrush, skittish yet possessive, eagerness somehow palpable. As they walked, Max noticed movement from the corner of his eye, a figure flitting just out of reach, a glimpse of pale skin and dark, tangled hair disappearing behind a tree, too reminiscent of the dark girl they had just vanquished. "Did you see that?" he cried out, his voice more frantic than he intended. "See what?" Mia asked, but there was already a frown on her face, and she was quicker now, moving toward where he pointed. Yet, the woods remained still, betraying nothing of what had just been there. "I swear I saw someone," he insisted, unease settling thickly in his stomach like a stone. Leo looked around nervously, hugging himself against the chill that seemed to intensify, pressing in closer and closer. "Maybe it's just our minds playing tricks now," he suggested, voice shaky but trying to sound brave. All at once, their surroundings shifted as the trees loomed taller, the path darker. The light had waned slowly, and the shadows became more alive, stretching across the ground, mingling with the roots that twisted like gnarled hands desperately reaching for them. They pressed on, anxiety hanging thick among them, until a low rustling echoed from the underbrush nearby. They turned toward the sound, hearts racing as a muffled sob broke through the air. It was hauntingly familiar, like a distant memory lingering in a dark corner. The noise seemed to teeter on the edge of something sweet and sorrowful. However, it cased their breaths with an uneasy dread. "Hello," Mia called out, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Is someone there?" A moment passed in anxious silence. Then the sobbing escalated into a spine-chilling wail that cut through the dusk. It was despair, laced with grief, echoing through the trees and sending ripples of dread through Max and the others. They stepped back instinctively, fear pooling like ice in their veins, while shadows twisted ominously around them. The whimpering grew louder, drowning out the rustle of leaves, almost as if it were rising around them, voices intertwining with the trees, urging them to come closer, pleading through every crackle of broken branches. "Should we go?" Leo asked uncertainly, glancing back at Max with wide, frightened eyes. I don't think we should," Max replied, though part of him felt drawn toward the sound, curious yet terrified. As if in response to their hesitation, the wailing converged into a low, guttural laugh that sent chills cascading down Max's spine. It skittered through the air like claws scraping along bone, and suddenly, faces emerged from the darkness, ghostly visages that peeked from behind the trees, eyes wide and mouths curled into unspeakable grins. They were the faces of those lost, those who had succumbed to despair, taunting them with their haunting presence, their lips moving in silent desperation. Each face glinted in the dwindling light, making Max want to scream, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. They beckoned to him, their arms swaying slowly, a macabre dance choreographed in shadows, inviting him deeper into their despairing world. "Mia, we need to leave," he shouted, snapping out of the nightmarish trance. But as she turned, the ground beneath them shifted again, and a strong wind whipped through the trees. The whispers grew louder, sinister and sweet, as if coaxing them to join their sad song of eternal mourning. Tendrils of darkness brushed against Max's skin, cold and biting as they wrapped closer around them. "Run!" Leo finally screamed, breaking through the fog of fear, and they dashed back the way they had come, limbs pumping hard, but the forest seemed to reshape around them, paths twisting and turning as if mocking their escape. The wailing grew louder still, echoing in their ears like a relentless tide, drowning out their thoughts and filling the air with a cloying scent, a mix of decay and forgotten promises that made them gag. Shadows surged around them, whipping like snakes, caught in a frantic dance, elongating and twisting with malicious intent, trying to catch their ankles. Max glanced over his shoulder, barely able to see through the growing darkness. The faces were back, swirling in the dense fog, their eyes pleading yet filled with a haunting madness that chilled him to the bone. He felt the air grow heavy, pressing against his lungs, and something surged within him, the compass around his neck warming under his shirt, a silent reminder of their purpose. Through clenched teeth, he shouted out, "We're not afraid of you. We're here to fight." The words ignited a flicker of flame within him, igniting fervor that coursed through his veins like wildfire. In that moment of affirmation, the shadows reeled back, a disjointed scream breaking through the air as if their words had struck like a hammer against glass, shattering their hold. The trees shook violently, roots thrashing against the ground, as if the very forest was rebelling against the darkness encroaching on them. "Keep moving," Mia urged, pulling Leo along with her, the three of them burning with newfound determination. Yet the woods remained a labyrinth, each step they took sending them further into a corner with no clear escape. The more they ran, the more the shadows lost their grip, swirling helplessly as though casting spells from afar, desperate to confuse them. But just as the dark girl had once been formidable, now they were unified, desperate to break the chain of despair and pain. Ahead, a flicker of light appeared, drawing them toward it, a dying ember fighting against the darkness surrounding it. Max's heart raced, recognizing that it could be their salvation, or perhaps something even darker yet lying in wait. "Do you see it?" he yelled to the others as they barreled toward the flicker, the wailing and laughter morphing into something that teased at their sanity. "Yes, just keep running," Mia shouted back, her voice filled with both hope and dread. As they reached the light, a sudden torrent of wind whipped around them, slamming them against it, and for a fleeting moment, they were enveloped in a warm embrace that pushed back against the shadows. The light pulsed, growing warmer, bathing them in hope. But the shadows surged, pulling back and gathering their strength. The whispers escalated again, a cacophony of voices howling from the depths of the woods. "You cannot escape. You belong to us." The very ground trembled beneath their feet, shaking with the power of those voices, the darkness rising like a tidal wave, threatening to swallow them whole. They huddled closer, hands joined, magically woven into a single thread of will, fighting against the insidious whispers. "Together!" Max shouted, the fire within him igniting with urgency, and they pushed against the darkness, ready to fight for every lost soul, their determination a beacon against the chaos. In that terrifying moment, light and shadow collided once more as they drew nearer to the flickering hope, willing it to guide them through the storm that threatened to consume them all. The light shimmered like a fragile lantern against the tide of darkness, flickering nervously as if aware of the chaos surrounding it. Max, Mia, and Leo pressed forward, their feet pounding against the damp earth, a frantic rhythm echoing in time with their racing hearts. As they neared the source of illumination, it began to take shape, an ancient tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted, branches reaching toward the sky like grasping hands desperate for deliverance. The light came from a hollow in the trunk, a soft glow that pulsed invitingly, a stark contrast to the menacing shadows that writhed hungrily just beyond its reach. But the shadows wouldn't let them go so easily. With a rush, they surged forward, a horde enveloping the trio, pulling at their elbows and twisting around their ankles, rooting them to the spot. Max felt the cold tendrils sliding over his skin, creeping up toward his throat, suffocating him with a noxious chill. "Don't give in. Remember the girl," Mia shouted, shaking off the tendrils that threatened to draw her into the abyss. Max's mind snapped back to that fateful encounter. The hollow eyes of the dark girl, the plea mingled with malice. She wasn't just anyone. She was a piece of the forest's darkness, woven into its very fabric. But they had found the will to fight, and the balance of power began to shift. "Focus on the light," Leo cried, a raw intensity in his voice as he wrestled against the encroaching shadows. Each word expelled a small burst of energy, and as they focused on that warm glow, the cold shadows began to retreat, hissing and swirling away like vapor before a fire. In that moment, emboldened by their resolve, Max reached out toward the glowing hollow, feeling an inexplicable connection to it. He could sense the ancient magic thrumming through the air, a promise of warmth and safety. "We need to push together," he urged, a steady determination uniting them as they joined hands and forged a chain of unwavering trust. As one, they surged toward the tree, pouring every ounce of their energy into that radiant light, fighting against the desperation that clawed at them. The shadows shrieked as the brilliance began to engulf them, howling with anger and pain. Max's mind buzzed, filled with the whispers of lost souls, imploring him to turn back, to yield to despair. But they refused. With a final, agonizing push, they stepped into the light, breaking the grip of the shadows as if bursting through a barrier of glass. The warmth washed over them like sunlight after a storm, vibrant and life-giving. For a moment, the world outside faded away, the dark forest blurring into obscurity as they embraced the light. But that peace was fleeting. The shadows, furious and unyielding, snapped back together outside, swirling around the tree, gathering their strength for a final assault. From their depths, the dark girl appeared again, her figure wailing, a sorrowful specter silhouetted against the dim light. "You cannot hide from me," she bellowed, her voice reverberating through the trees as if she were a part of the very essence of the forest. Mia gasped, stepping slightly back as dread trickled into her veins. "We need to fight her. We can't let her pull us down with her." Struggling against the weight of despair, Max narrowed his focus on the light, harnessing it like a weapon. The glow began to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, filling him with a warm energy that coursed through him like wildfire. "We can do this," he shouted, gripping Mia and Leo's hands tighter. The shadows coiled around them again, hissing with furious desperation, seeking to strangle their hopes once more. But even as they fought against the dark girl's grasp, the light grew brighter, illuminating the figures of lost souls trapped within the shadows, their distorted faces flickering like candles in a storm. "Please, let us go," one of them cried, and Max felt the weight of their pain wash over him. The shadows flared at the sound, anger surging like a tidal wave. The circle of hands tightened further, a physical manifestation of their determination, and within that bond, they felt the whispers of the lost souls mingling with their own hopes, merging into a chorus of shared resolve. "Let them out!" Leo roared, courage sparking as he let all of his fear flow into the words. As if answering his plea, the radiant light intensified, brightening until it burst into a blinding supernova, illuminating the entire forest. The shadows recoiled and shrieked, twisting and fighting against the brilliance that flooded the dark corners of the woods. Within that surge, Max caught glimpses of the trapped souls, their anguished faces breaking through the darkness, eyes wide with longing for freedom. "Run toward the light," he commanded, feeling the power of their collective voice fill the air. The dark girl faltered, her figure flickering dangerously, caught in the intensity of their united will. And then, as if time slowed, the shadows flared back one last time, unraveling into wisps of smoke. The faces of the lost souls surged upward, reaching toward the light, desperate for release. "No!" the dark girl shrieked, her voice filled with a sorrowful rage that echoed through the trees. "You'll pay for this." But as Max, Mia, and Leo dove deeper into that newfound brightness, it felt like an undeniable surge of freedom. Together, they surged forward, colliding with the pulse of light, breaking through the darkness that had imprisoned so many for so long. The breath of the forest shifted, an explosion of energy sending ripples through the trees as they released their hold, and the flickering souls soared into the air, pure and unburdened. Yet as the shadows dissipated, uncertainty lingered. The dark girl's final scream echoed in their ears, her anger merging with a haunting sadness, forming a promise of return. "Do we really win?" Max whispered, breathless as they stood encircled in the glow, the forest falling eerily silent around them. Mia shivered, her eyes scanning the tree-line where the shadows had once danced. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving," she insisted, voice steady and firm. Leo nodded, looking more resolved than ever. "Yeah, there might be more of them. We need to figure out what they were protecting, or why they were trapped here in the first place." The forest felt different now, lighter, but filled with a lingering tension, a palpable reminder that darkness often lies just beneath the surface. They stepped cautiously, the path before them illuminated by the fading light, uncertainty twisting in their hearts. As they ventured forth, the ethereal glow began to fade behind them, swallowed by the encroaching shadows. But they held on to one another, knowing they would face whatever nightmare awaited them together. And with that, they plunged deeper into the heart of the forest, their steps echoing through the quiet stillness, each breath filled with the weight of the unknown as they sought to uncover the secrets hidden in the darkness, still reverberating from the dark power they had just escaped. The forest around them felt alive, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs echoing like distant warnings. Max led the way, his senses heightened, but he couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching from the darkness. The cold air brushed against his skin, sending shivers down his spine as they navigated the twisted underbrush. As they pressed on, the shadows seemed to weave tighter around them, whispering unintelligible words that sent chills racing through Mia. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the dark girl looming behind them, but the path they had traversed remained eerily quiet. A thread of anxiety snaked through her thoughts. "Do you think she'll come back?" "Maybe," Leo replied, his eyes scanning the thick trees. "But we can't dwell on that. We need to find a way out of here." They trudged deeper, but every step felt increasingly heavy. The trees loomed larger, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky, a maze of darkness closing in around them. Faint whispers hummed in the air, sadness entwined with bitterness, echoing the lost hopes of the souls they'd glimpsed before. As twilight began to descend, the light that had protected them faded into dim shadows, and panic set in again. Max halted abruptly, the weight of an oppressive silence crashing down like a shroud, pressing against their ears. "Did you hear that?" he murmured, straining to capture the sound that felt both near and far away. Mia squinted into the gloom, holding her breath. I think so," she stammered, the unease creeping back like icy fingers coiling around her heart. Just then, a figure emerged from the trees, a silhouette that blurred in and out of view, flickering as if unstable. Max's heart raced. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling in the silence, echoing into the dark expanse beyond. There was a moment of pause, and then the air thickened with an overwhelming dread. The figure stepped forward, revealing a hollow-eyed face, twisted into a sinister smile. "You should not have come here," it rasped, the words dripping like poison. The sight sent a wave of nausea through Mia, her breath quickening as she stumbled back. "What do you want?" she cried out, clinging to Leo's arm, desperate for stability among the rising terror. "Only to show you the truth," the creature whispered, gliding closer, its shadowy form undulating like smoke. It reached out a long, skeletal finger toward them, and with a single touch, the forest erupted with ghastly images swirling around them. They were suddenly surrounded by visions, faces of the lost souls, half-formed and wailing, their mouths stretching in silent screams as they reached out to them, yearning for release. Max felt his heart lurch with despair, recognizing the pain etched on their faces, the same torment he had seen before. "Stop it!" he shouted, fury igniting within him. "Let them go!" The figure chuckled, a haunting sound that echoed as if the forest itself were mocking him. "You think you can save them? You're just as trapped as they are. They belong here, just as you eventually will." With every word, shadows climbed higher, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket, pulling them closer into the darkness. Max clutched Mia and Leo tighter, determination rising as he prepared to fight. "Together!" he yelled, as he focused on the flickering light remaining within him, the memory of their shared hope. An energy pulsed through his veins, and he felt Mia and Leo rallying beside him, their connection a beacon pulling them from the brink of despair. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as if burned by the very essence of their unity. "You cannot escape," the figure hissed, its form writhing like a wounded beast. With an intense cry, they surged toward the figure, their collective will manifesting into a blinding force. The air sizzled as they broke through the barrier of darkness, rushing toward the light that sparkled just ahead, a glimmer of safety amidst the void. As the shadows screamed in agonizing fury, the forest began to shake, roots ripping from the ground and trees bending as if caught in a violent storm. The creature's anguished cries merged with the rustling leaves, crafting a symphony of chaos as they pushed through, the last remnants of despair clawing at their backs. With one final burst of strength, they leaped past the creature, escaping its grasp and tearing through the final shrouds of darkness. They stumbled into a clearing, collapsing onto the cool grass, gasping for breath, their hearts thundering like frantic drums in their chests. But the relief was short-lived. The air in the clearing felt different, charged with an unsettling energy that prickled against their skin. Shadows danced at the edges, taunting them, while the trees loomed close, their branches swaying without wind. And there, pooling at the center of the clearing, was a dark, shimmering puddle. "Is that?" Mia began, dread pooling in her gut as she slowly approached. "Don't!" Max shouted, yanking her back just in time to prevent her from touching it. "It's a trap." The puddle seemed to ripple with its own heartbeat, beckoning with a whispering allure. "Come closer," it coaxed, the sound seductive and dark, yet somehow familiar. "Don't let it in your head," Leo warned, his voice strained as he took a cautious step backward. "It tries to twist your thoughts." Max could feel the pull, a tugging sensation that threatened to breach the fortress they had built within themselves. "We need to keep moving," he urged, eyes darting around for any potential way out. But the trees closed in tighter, as if forming a barrier around them. Then, a chilling laughter chimed from behind them, piercing the heavy air as the dark girl emerged once more, fading in and out of reality. "You think you're free? This is only the beginning," she taunted, her voice haunting, echoing through the clearing like an inescapable nightmare. The ground beneath their feet trembled, sending jolts of panic through their bodies as they realized the shadows were not just obstacles, but a living entity, hungry and relentless. "Together, we have to stay together," Max shouted, gripping Mia and Leo tightly. But fear simmered within each of them, threatening to break the bond that held their spirits alight. The dark girl glided closer, her eyes shimmering with a dangerous spark. "Embrace the fear. Let it guide you. You cannot fight what you are destined to become." In a flurry of determination, they turned, their legs moving before their minds could catch hold of the impending doom. The shadows swirled behind them, swirling like a storm intent on sweeping them back into the darkness. They raced on, determined to break away from the pull of the abyss. But with every stride, the shadows chased them, whispers echoing, entreating them to stop, to turn back. Tired voices of lost souls joined the cacophony, their cries melding with the dark girl's laughter, weaving a web of despair that tugged ceaselessly at their minds. Then, in the distance, another glimmer appeared, a flicker that fought against the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat, urging them onward. It felt like hope, an anchor in the suffocating storm. "Over there!" Leo shouted, barely managing to catch Max's eye as he pointed toward the light. They didn't hesitate. With renewed vigor, they sprinted toward it, the warmth of the light penetrating the shroud of darkness. But behind them, the shadows grew insatiable, their tendrils reaching out to pull them back into the void. "Don't look back!" Mia shouted as they dashed towards the brightness, half expecting the dark girl to lunge forward, intent on dragging them down once again. The light enveloped them, wrapping around their bodies like a protective cocoon, giving them strength to push through just a little further. As they barreled forward, they felt the shadows colliding into the barrier, the screams of lost souls rising around them as though they were centuries of torment finally calling for justice. "Keep going," Max urged, their bravery intertwining, propelling them forward, blurring the lines between light and shadow. The dark girl's wrath ricocheted behind them, a presence that threatened to siphon their very souls. But even as despair clawed at their heels, they could feel that glimmer of light growing brighter, alive and powerful, a promise of freedom from the dark that had lingered far too long. And with that last surge, the world around them erupted in blinding brilliance, a golden wave washing over them, sweeping them into a realm beyond the forest, leaving darkness screaming behind. But as they crossed into the light, a chilling thought lingered. What if the darkness was still there, lurking just beyond their sight, biding its time for when they might falter again? The brightness enveloped them like a warm blanket, but the sense of safety was fragile, as though the light itself was a mere illusion woven through the layers of darkness that still lingered at the edges of their consciousness. As they stumbled forward from the blinding glare, Max glanced around, taking note of the new surroundings. Their once familiar forest had dissipated into a murky twilight realm, filled with twisted trees and dilapidated remnants of an old village that appeared abandoned. The air was thick with mist that swirled unnaturally, swirling around their legs like ghostly fingers eager to drag them back. The village was silent, but that silence felt heavy, pregnant with secrets, and the weight of the shadows that had followed them grew as they moved deeper. It was almost suffocating, as if the air itself was trying to steal their breath, making each inhale a battle against unseen forces. "Where are we?" Mia whispered, her voice barely breaking through the oppressive quiet. She could feel a chill crawl up her spine and glanced around, the trees looming tall and crooked, creaking softly as if in response to her fear. An old wooden sign swung uneasily in the gentle breeze, its letters worn and partially erased by time, spelling out an unrecognizable name that sent a shudder through her. "I don't know," Max replied, his brow furrowing as they wandered farther into the ghostly village. Remnants of shattered windows stared back at them like empty, hollow eyes, and collapsed buildings leaned precariously, ready to give in to the creeping decay. Something felt deeply wrong here, like the very essence of the place was steeped in sorrow and despair. As they walked, the ground beneath them began to tremble, a low rumble that made the stones quiver like the heartbeat of a giant. The mist thickened and a low growl resonated from deeper within the village, rolling over them like thunder, echoing their own fears and doubts. "We need to find shelter," Leo said, his voice tight with urgency, his eyes darting around as if expecting to see the dark girl at any moment, lurking in the fog, waiting for her opportunity to strike. "Somewhere safe until we figure this out." They pushed forward despite the rising sense of dread. The further they traveled, the more distorted the surroundings became. Faded portraits hung crookedly on the walls of decaying houses, their subjects' faces obscured, but every pair of eyes seemed to follow them, gazing with an intense, penetrating darkness that made Mia shiver. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her heart racing. An icy draft swept through the alley, sending leaves spiraling wildly around them, and for a moment it felt as if the village itself was breathing, whispering secrets from its past. Before Leo could reply, The growl from earlier crescendoed into a haunting wail that cut through the silence like a blade, freezing them in place. It was a sound of pure suffering, a deep throaty groan that seemed to reverberate from the very ground, asking for release. "What is that?" Max breathed, dread settling like a stone in his gut, as he instinctively took a step closer to Mia, their shoulders brushing against one another. The decision to separate now felt more perilous than before, keeping them tightly knit together, with fear anchoring their resolve. As they hesitated, the wailing evolved into a cacophony of voices, lamenting in anguish as if pleading for someone to hear their despair. Strange shadows flitted between the ruins, darting between the crumbling walls and inscrutable forms. Whispers filled the air, overlapping and echoing, the sadness palpable, as if the lost souls of the village were crying out for liberation. "We can't stay here," Leo insisted, his voice a little firmer now, propelling them into action once more. They picked their way through the ruins, the whispers rising to a barely coherent chorus, the lyrics haunting yet ungraspable, a song of sorrow sung by unseen specters. But in their desperate push to escape, they stumbled into an opening in the hedge that separated the village from a darkened forest, eerily similar to the one they thought they had left behind. Tangled branches twisted threateningly overhead, their claws reaching down as if trying to ensnare them. The atmosphere shifted, dramatic and unsettling. An unshakable feeling of being watched seeped into their skin, igniting anxious glances over their shoulders. Max could hardly breathe, the weight of unseen eyes resting heavily upon him, setting his pulse racing. "We shouldn't have come here," Mia murmured, her eyes darting, still feeling the weight of those portraits watching, those spectral eyes boring into their souls. In the heart of the forest, shadows coalesced, filling the corners of their vision, darting slightly out of reach, weaving in and out like lurid phantoms. "We need to focus," Max stated, struggling to keep his fear at bay, pressing on despite the tension that swelled around them. Moments later, they broke into a small glade, a dim light illuminating a stone altar at the center, glistening with moisture and dark stains that resembled dried blood. As they stepped closer, drawn to the flickering glow that surrounded the altar, the air thickened with an ominous energy. Max felt an urge to touch the altar, compelled by something he couldn't explain. Yet there was an undercurrent of danger that surged through the ground beneath him, a warning echoing from deep inside his mind. "Stop!" Leo shouted, grabbing Max's arm just before he could reach out. "Don't do it!" The moment was tense, the flickering light casting long, stark shadows that twisted grotesquely around them, reaching out as if alive. Max froze, staring at the altar with wide eyes, the energy beneath his fingertips humming with attention. The atmosphere around them shifted again, words materializing in the air, whispers weaving through the fog, taking shape into something almost recognizably sinister. "Feed us," a soft voice echoed, slithering around their senses like a serpent. "We seek sustenance, the price for your passage home." "What do you mean?" Mia croaked, her voice trembling as the shadows darkened their surroundings, closing in, creeping ever closer, as if drawn towards the altar's blinding light. The voices grew louder, almost frenzied, clawing at her thoughts. "Your fear, your memories. Give us your weight of sorrow. Only then can you escape this wretched place." Max felt his heart race as they stood rooted to the spot, the shadows swirling into a tempest of desperation around them. "We can't give them anything," he managed to say, the sense of defiance swelling within him. But as though reacting to his words, the shadows began to pulse, revealing limbs that extended out like grasping hands. The sky darkened above them as tendrils of shadow broke from the trees, snaking forward hungrily, weaving around the altar in a chaotic dance. "You have no choice," the voice hissed, 1,000 tones blending together, weaving through the air until it resembled one overwhelming presence that thrummed with malevolence. In that moment, panic surged through each of them, urging them to act against the gathering shadows. Leo yanked Mia closer, and Max stepped back, struggling desperately against the weight that threatened to drag them back to their darkest fears. As they fought against the collective energy, a realization struck him. Perhaps there was strength in sharing their burdens, unraveling the chains of anguish that held them captive. "We can fight this together," he declared, taking a bold step forward, ripping through the clutches of fear that hovered just behind him. "You can't resist," the shadows shrilled, almost frantically. "Watch me," Max shot back defiantly, the glow from the altar intensifying in response to his rising resolve, illuminating the fear etched on Mia and Leo's faces, their breaths heavy but determined. Gathering their courage, thoughts intertwined, they forged an unbreakable bond, a smoldering light that sparked from shared pain, igniting into fighting spirit. "We will not be your victims," Mia shouted, standing tall beside Max, her heart racing but her voice steady, emboldened by a shimmering warmth she felt deep within. As they channeled their fear into defiance, the atmosphere crackled around them, sending tendrils of radiant energy toward the altar, battling against the consuming darkness, while time itself twisted and slipped, the weight of shadows slamming against their newfound strength. But something deep inside Max whispered, what if this was merely a momentary victory? What if the darkness was merely waiting, watching, waiting for them to falter, lurking beyond their limited sight? The shadows recoiled, shrieking in a chorus of anguish as the radiant energy surged from the trio. It felt almost intoxicating, the way the light pushed back against the darkness, but Max needed to stay grounded. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a moment's reprieve, an unsettling lull before an impending storm. The ground pulsed beneath them, each beat like a heartbeat, resonating with the despair that built upon the altar. The figures in the mist seemed to swirl, losing form and coherence, but their eyes remained fixed upon them, hollow and hungry. Max caught a flicker of movement to his side, something darting between the trees, too quick to comprehend, a glimpse of dark laughter that sent a shiver racing up his spine. As they focused on the altar, the shadows began to writhe like living things, tendrils snaking out to grasp at the light, searching for any fissure to exploit. Every undulation felt like a creeping cold finger across their skin, drawing nearer, searching for their vulnerabilities. "Stay close," Leo shouted, his voice strained as the shadows began to congeal again, becoming more sinister, swirling together to form shapes. Monstrous figures took form, grotesque faces mirroring their deepest fears, twisted representations of sorrow that threatened to drag them back into despair. Mia took a step back, eyes wide as she recognized the face of a long-lost friend in the shadows, her mouth moving in a silent scream. "No, that's not real," she gasped, horror flooding her stomach. "It's a trick," Max urged, trying to block out the sight. "Focus on each other, not on them." The energy between them flickered as the threat loomed larger. The shadows were gaining strength, their cries feeding on the emotions coursing through Max's veins. The air thickened, heavy with memories best forgotten. Distant echoes of their past drifted through the gloom, unearthing pain and regret. Max felt the heartache sink in, a painful loss, a mistake that could never be undone. Faces of those they'd loved flashed before him, blending into a haze of indistinct terror. "Fight it," he shouted again, but the voices lined with regret wrapped around him, constricting tighter, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He could feel the shadow's icy grip creep closer, felt the fabric of his resolve threaten to unravel as he caught sight of the remnants of the village, a place that had once been full of life, now turned into a graveyard of despair. Leo gritted his teeth, fists clenched tight. "We don't have to bear this alone," he yelled, stepping closer to the altar, drawing strength from the flickering light. Together, they leaned into each other, forming an anchor, the connection becoming a pulsating pulse of hope amid the creeping dread. With every heartbeat, they sent their fears cascading into the growing shine, illuminating their unified stand against the darkness. The shadows shrieked, thrashing violently against the flickering light, and for a moment it seemed they might break apart, that endless tendrils of darkness might swallow them whole. But as they focused, pooling their grief and anger into that brilliant light. The shadows began to dissipate, retreating like waves pulled back from the shore. A moment of quiet settled over the glade as the shadows thinned, but as soon as it appeared, currents shifted, the tranquil silence shattered by an agitated whisper, a creeping sense that something still lurked in the wings of the fog. "They're not gone," Mia breathed, casting anxious glances around them, a thunderous feeling drumming against their hearts. From beyond the mist, laughter, soft and sinister, flowed like a murmur through the air, swirling around them like the wind. It seized at their nerves, chilling them to the bone, coating their skin with goosebumps. "What do they want?" Leo shouted, his voice echoing through the eerie silence, and the laugh twisted, widening unnervingly. "Is this a game?" "This is no game," a voice crooned, floating from the shadows, smooth and dripping with malice. From the depths, a form began to emerge, a silhouette cloaked in darkness, gliding gracefully, moving as though the shadows were alive, clinging to it like a shroud. It stepped forward, revealing sharp features, hollow eyes with no discernible depth, and a grin that seemed far too wide for comfort. "I've waited so long for you all," the figure crooned, its voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. Something about it held a magnetic quality, drawing them closer despite their instinct to flee. The air thickened with a tension that caused every hair on the back of Max's neck to rise. Who are you?" Max stammered, clenching his fists, fighting the urge to look back toward the altar. The warmth that had radiated from it began to flicker, uncertain, as if the arrival of this shadowy stalker threatened to extinguish their energy altogether. "I am the keeper of the lost," it replied, stepping fully into the fading light. A gust of wind whipped through the glade, capturing the remaining tendrils of darkness that still clung to the trees, shimmering ominously as it moved through tendrils of mist. "I am the whisper in the night, the doubt that festers in your heart. I thrive on what you fear most." The shadows swarmed closer, eager to hear every word, as if the creature's presence sent them into a frenzy. With each syllable that fell from its malevolent lips, the very fabric of their surroundings seemed to warp, dragging them further into despair. "You crave freedom, but to escape, you must give me something precious," it taunted, circling around them, graceful yet terrifying, cutting through the air like a knife. "We won't give you anything," Leo shouted back, though the tremor in his voice belied a flicker of doubt that permeated the air. Max felt it too. The shadows were returning, weaving through the air, searching for the seams in their defenses. "It's a trick," he cried. "Do not listen to it." "But listen you must," the keeper hissed, an edge of glee creeping into its voice. "That bond of yours so fragile. All it takes is but a single thought." The glade pulsed with an unseen energy as it spoke, tugging at their minds, feeding off their fears. Old wounds opened like gaping scars, threatening to bleed once more. Mia shuddered, stepping back farther, pain flashing across her face, a reminder of failures past, before she steadied herself. "We can't let you win," she yelled defiantly. The air buzzed with tension as the keeper's smile widened, unfurling like a flower blooming in darkness. "Win or lose, you have already lost." At that moment, the shadows surged forward, swarming like a dark tide, and Max could feel their grasp wrapping around his heart, the echoes of despair ringing in his ears. Panic washed over him as his light flickered, struggling against the pressure crushing in from all sides, the burden of memories weighing down harder than he ever thought possible. "Remember the scream of the lost, the memories that haunt your dreams. They are mine now," the keeper whispered sweetly, weaving its words through the air like a spider spinning a web. It felt as if all hope began to slip away, the light dimming, shadows laughing and circling closer, but somewhere inside him, Max felt a fire igniting, a defiance born of desperation. He took a deep breath, drawing on the strength of his friends, pushing back against the darkness, declaring with every fiber of his being that they would not surrender. "We will find a way," he shouted, a new sense of resolve illuminating his heart. And in that moment, something shifted. The altar pulsed once again, rekindling the bright luminescence that had waned, the battle between light and dark once more on the brink. Your fight is futile, the keeper warned, yet its confidence wavered as the light surged, swirling fiercely despite the gathering gloom. But Max knew this was only the beginning. The darkness may have lurked at the edges, waiting for their moment to falter, but united, they would push against the weight of the lurking horror, determined to resist the pull of the netherworld that sought to reclaim them. The darkness was far from over, and shadows of what they feared were clawing to claim them. But in this moment, they had each other, standing shoulder to shoulder. The air crackled as their unity pushed back against the edge of oblivion, light bursting forth with a fierce resolve, illuminating the thick shadows that closed in around them. For a moment, it felt like they had an advantage, the keeper's smile faltering slightly, but as quickly as hope surged, a sinister chant began to rise from the depths of the encroaching darkness, a low, rhythmic whisper that twisted through the trees. Join us, become one with the void. The voices echoed, a cacophony of despair that drummed against Max's ears, each syllable steeped in malice, urging them to surrender. The shadows thickened, twirling like smoke in a tempest, coiling around Max's legs like serpents, drawing him down into the depths of fear. Cold tendrils brushed against his skin, sapping his warmth, and he felt the icy grip scrambling at his thoughts, dragging up the memories best left buried. He saw his childhood home, walls painted with laughter, but now the echoes twisted, grim reminders of loss and heartache invading every surface. The fleeting happiness turned mournful, shadows creeping through the doorways, dark figures watching, waiting for a chance to devour. Max! Mia's voice broke through the haze, her hand tightening around his, grounding him as she pushed back against the shadows. Yet he could see the fear hidden behind her brave attempts. Crisp leaves crunched underfoot, as if mocking them, whispering secrets of despair that threatened to drown them all. We have to focus, Leo yelled, his voice raw, straining against the mounting dread. The trees around them groaned ominously, branches twisting and bending, as if even nature itself feared the keeper lurking in the depths of the shadows. The light flickered again, this time dimmer, vulnerability seeping in as the dark whispers grew more intense. Max felt the shadows clawing at his mind, wrapping around his consciousness like a vice, testing the boundaries of his spirit. Each breath was a struggle, each heartbeat a reminder of his fears coming to life. It's feeding off us, he gasped, panic creeping into his voice. Everything we feel, it wants us to falter, and it was true. The shadows danced eagerly, reshaping themselves into horrific visages that mirrored their anguish. Faces appearing in the mist, mouths agape in silent screams. Picture the light, Mia urged through clenched teeth, her brow furrowed as she concentrated. Hold on to who you love, who you fight for. Max drew a heavy breath, and with it, he envisioned his family, their bright smiles etched in his mind, the love that nestled warmth within him. The flicker of their memory ignited sparks of defiance. The shadows grew restless, hissing as if scorched by the light of his remembrance. The keeper, sensing their resilience, surged forward, blocking the light's path, slithering like smoke, a creature of living nightmares. What you love can be taken, torn asunder. You will never escape the grasp of despair, it taunted, its voice a chilling melody that echoed in the dimness. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the trees swayed as if bowing to the darkness, desperate to please a cruel master. With every moment, the keeper loomed larger, a monstrous shadow spilling over them, and Max felt that terrible weight pressing onto his soul, the dread twisting with every heartbeat. We don't need to escape, he shouted defiantly, shaking his head, forcing himself to remember. We will fight together, with renewed purpose. He tightened his grip on Mia and Leo, their hands forming an unbreakable chain against the looming horror. But the shadows responded, flaring in anger. They rushed forward, piercing the air like daggers, each one a memory crafted from fear, anxiety, and regret. Max felt a piercing pain slice through him as one shadow took the shape of a past mistake, an old friend betrayed, a relationship shattered, and despair surged through him like a chilling tide. "No!" he screamed, pulling hard against the dark current, pushing forth the memories of joy, laughter, and love. "Get out of my head!" Yet the shadows pressed on, relentless, shaping terrors that knotted within his stomach, weaving together his worst fears into a tapestry of horror. He could see endless faces, reflected his every loss, twisting in pain, nail-laden shadows clawing towards him, hungry for his surrender. "Look at them," the keeper urged, voice smooth as silk, drawing nearer, its form shifting like smoke around them. "Your past is a scar, forever, forever. Admit you can't escape. We won't," Mia shouted back, fighting the swell of despair. Through clenched teeth and fierce resolve, she pushed back, and the light surged stronger for just a moment, battling the encroaching horrors, illuminating the dark recesses of their surroundings. But the keeper's laughter rang through the air, dark and mocking, drenched in darkness. "You think your light can save you? You have yet to understand the eternal void," it hissed, and the shadows swarmed like a frenzied tide, wild and uncontrollable. The glade seemed to twist and warp, shadows pressing heavily against them until the very space they occupied felt distorted, as if reality bent to the will of the darkness, a nightmare painted in muted tones. "Remember, hold on to each other," Leo shouted, voice strained as he struggled against the consuming whirl of despair. Their fingers intertwined. Warmth pulsed at their connection, each heartbeat a reminder that together they could resist the all-consuming abyss. And in that moment, they saw the faintest flicker glow brighter, a small beacon pushing through the dark. "We are stronger together," Max chanted, feeling the fear begin to fracture at the seams. "We won't let you in." Just beyond the shadows, haunting laughter seemed to crescendo, an otherworldly melody that wove through the air, capturing every bit of tension as it pulled tight, constricting around them. "You will find no sanctuary here," the keeper crooned, the shadows thickening, several forms arching behind it, as if a host of forgotten souls were rising, hunger gleaming in their hollow eyes. With every inch they gained, every breath taken, the whispers clawed and tugged at their thoughts, but Max pushed deeper, summoning forth memories of solace, reminders of the light that flickered bright. The shadows wavered, and the keeper's form faltered, losing definition, the power of their resolve somehow pushing back the relentless tide. And for one brief moment, Max could see the anguish hidden in the keeper's eyes, an echo of something that once was, a fleeting reminder that even in darkness, there could be light. "We will break this cycle," he vowed, voice steady amidst the storm, a promise that reverberated through the chaos. As that single thought consolidated into a beam of light, it exploded outward in waves, radiating warmth against the encroaching cold, forcing the shadows to retreat, shrieking against the onslaught toward the depths of the glade. "Together!" Leo yelled, and they thrust their combined energy forward, the light swallowing the darkness as it surged, illuminating their surroundings in a blaze of brilliant clarity. But beneath that fleeting victory, Max could still feel the lingering presence of the darkness, shaping itself into another form, watching from the corners of their sight. Something deep within him whispered that the darkness was not defeated yet. It only waited for the right moment to strike again. As the light pulsed around them, forcing the shadows to retreat, Max felt a fleeting sense of triumph. But it was quickly crushed as he felt that familiar chill creeping back in, a cold hand brushing against the nape of his neck. Something darker was lurking just beyond the edges of their hard-won light, watching, waiting. The air turned thick, suffocating, and the joyous interplay of light and dark became a battle of wills, the keeper's laughter echoing in the glade, a mocking reminder of the horrors they had yet to face. "You think you've won? Oh, my dear children, the night is still young." It echoed, voice weaving through the trees like a sinister wind that attempted to draw them back into despair. The shadows shifted again, coiling and weaving as if alive, swarming around them like a storm of darkness. Memories began to materialize from the depths of that darkness, twisted reflections of their lives, moments of loss and fear that gnawed at the edges of their resolve. Faces loomed, familiar yet grotesque, smeared with pain and confusion, as each shadow took on the form of their own worst nightmares, creeping ever closer, their whispers curling like smoke around minuscule gasps. Remember when you lost everything? One shadow hissed, drawing closer, its face a monstrous version of Max's own. It wore a grin that didn't belong, full of malice, eyes hollow and sunken. You thought you were safe, didn't you? But look where you are now, trapped. Max could feel his heart pounding fiercely, the weight of dread settling like rocks in his stomach. Images flooded his mind, flashes of sorrow that had once been buried deep. His mother's frail figure lying cold and still, the sound of his father's desperate sobs echoing in the night. He felt his resolve unspooling, but he took a shuddering breath, focusing on the warmth of Mia and Leo beside him. Keep pushing, Leo urged, struggling against a shadow that morphed into his old school bully, a cruel smirk plastered on its face. They're not real, but the shadows had teeth and claws, and as they lunged forward, they raked at their emotions, pulling at their deepest fears. The air thickened, and the ground felt as if it would swallow them whole, darkness pooling at their feet like oil. Every heartbeat was a reminder of the terror that enveloped them. This is the end for you, the keeper intoned, slithering closer, its form fluctuating, flickering like a dying flame. All those you have loved will turn to ash, and all you will have left is despair. Shut up, Max shouted, voice trembling yet resolute. He could see shadows stretching behind the keeper, specters that twisted and wavered, whispering soft, haunting promises of defeat. Mia stepped forward, anger flaring in her eye, its fire flickering defiantly against the encroaching night. We won't let you in, you hear? We have each other, and that's more powerful than your darkness. Perhaps it was the conviction behind her words, but suddenly, in that moment, a burst of light pierced through, pushing against the shadows, forcing them to recoil. But the shadows convulsed, angry, retaliating instantly with chilling ferocity. The temperature dropped, their breath curling into clouds as muffled cries emerged from the depths of the dark. Each cry was a slither of pain, a reminder of the many chained to the keeper's will, lost and forgotten, faces morphing into shrieks of rage and anguish. Don't listen to them, Max shouted, his voice strained, plowing through the cacophony of cries. They want to drown us in memories. They want to steal our strength. But the shadows danced closer, whispering sweetly of pain, yet lingering in the comfort of familiar regret. Teeth gritted, Max realized that the keeper was feeding off their fears, and he struggled to force those thoughts from his mind. Think of the light, Leo echoed, his voice breaking through the noir visions that threatened to consume them. Not the darkness. The very earth trembled beneath them as the keeper twisted, growing larger, darker, a massive figure looming like a tempest ready to devour every last shred of their hope. You think you can defeat me? It screeched, the voice reverberating through the ground, crawling beneath their skin, clawing at their resolve. I am the end of your dreams, the silence you fear. With a surge of determination, Max cried out, we choose to remember the love, the laughter, the warmth that binds us. That is our power. And as those words echoed through the glade, the light surged once more, brighter than before, throwing the shadows into a fit. For a moment, the figures retreated, shrieking in anguish. But in the brief silence that followed, Max saw the shadows weaving together again, shifting, with more forms rising behind them, an army of nightmares ready to strike. Fear gripped him anew, the realization that this battle was far from over. Stay together, he called, clenching Mia's hand tighter, as if their contact alone could save them from the splintering darkness. The keeper watched with a wicked grin, slowly revealing jagged teeth that dripped with malice. "Look at them," it mocked, sweeping a hand toward the restless shadows that encircled them, now more menacing than ever. "They are you and all you've lost. You cannot escape your past." In that moment, entire rooms of mistakes flashed in Max's mind, each failure illuminated by sorrowful faces. They flickered around him like dying fireflies, agony radiating from their eyes, drawing nearer, feeding off his guilt. "This isn't who I am," Max shouted back, heart racing, defiance clawing against the fear. "I'm not defined by my pain." But as he spoke those words, he felt the shadows hungry for his resolve, eager to tear him apart from the inside. They twisted deeper, pulling up memories of betrayal and anguish, soul-crushing ripples hammering against the core of his being. "Mia," he gasped, gripping her hand tighter, desperation clawing at him. "Fight back. Remember who we truly are." She nodded fiercely, her gaze unwavering. "We're stronger than this," she shouted, her voice cutting through the haze as she pushed forward, becoming a living part of the light that radiated from them. "Together," Leo echoed, determination and fear coiling together as they shouted in unison, their voices forging a bond that pushed against the all-consuming darkness. And with that combined effort, a wave of light surged forth, illuminating the grotesque shadows momentarily as they recoiled. They felt the air tremble with the sound of cracking shadows, as if the very fabric of reality began to shatter. The keeper's expression twisted, fury twisting its features, yet a spark of fear flickered in its depths. "Futile, futile," it thundered, but something in its voice wavered. Fear and anger warred within it. The moment drew tight, filled with a tension that transcended time until Max felt it stitched together into a decision. "We refuse," he yelled, finding that small spark of fire deep inside, rallying his friends. "We will not give in to you." As his words reverberated outwards, the darkness flickered uncertainly, and just for an instant, the keeper's facade cracked, revealing something deeply unsettling and human within. A flicker of something once beautiful, perhaps a memory of its own. But just as quickly, the dark mask reformed, the smirk laced with malice. With a sudden roar, the shadows surged once more, crashing against their light like waves breaking on a rocky shore. Max felt them pushing back, gnashing teeth reaching for every part of him, their anger palpable, hot against his skin. But as they drew nearer, something deep within him ignited, a spark of pure determination, stubborn and unyielding. "We are not afraid," he shouted again, but this time, beyond fear, he found strength, the light pushing back against the tempest of darkness clawing at their minds. "We are together," Mia exclaimed, her voice cutting through the swirling chaos, her hands glowing as bright as stars, standing tall beside him, and Leo as the shadows faltered in their advance. And in that moment, the shadows wavered, as if unsure of their next move, and for a heartbeat, they drew back, whispering soft echoes of fear amidst the din. In that unforeseen moment of retreat, Max sensed an opportunity, a flicker of hope. "Now," he commanded, seeing the light surge and struggle against the storm, their friends' connections somehow brighter. The keeper twisted as if to envelop them once more, its form warping and straining to grasp hold. "You cannot fight the darkness. It is your very soul," it screeched, its voice now splintering as if a rift were forming in its being, yet still menacing. The shadows huddled close, forming a thick wall of despair. Max felt an array of emotions crash over him, anxiety and desperation threatening to drown out the flicker of light. Yet their combined thoughts drew strength from memories of laughter, joy, and a warmth that overshadowed any despair. "For every tear we've shed, in every trial we faced," Leo shouted, boldly stepping into the fray, "we will rise. Our light is our strength." The air trembled beneath the clamoring waves of shadows as Max, Mia, and Leo did not waver, holding their ground against the relentless tide. The boundaries of light began to shine clearer, pushing back against the depths of darkness with newfound urgency. "Keep pushing," Max commanded, heart racing as he focused his energy, their voices rising above the cacophony of despair that surrounded them. "The light is who we are, and it will guide us through this nightmare." The shadows screamed, a cacophony of rage that echoed in the depths of the night, curling around him like tendrils. But even as the painful memories lashed out, it was not enough to extinguish the light they had created. And yet, beneath that relentless surge, Max still felt the flicker of lurking darkness, waiting for any crack in their resolve, ready to strike at a moment's weakness. He clenched his fists, determination crystallizing in his veins. "We can't let them see us falter," he shouted again, and as his voice cut through the din, he felt the ground shift beneath them, the shadows swirling in furious disarray, yet still coiling closer, creeping ever tighter. But their bond, a tapestry of light woven through despair, pulled fiercely, illuminating the path ahead while painting the shadows in shades of fear. And no matter what lay ahead, they were not done fighting yet. The shadows hissed, a collective sound that reverberated like a million angry whispers, crawling closer to them as if they were seeking to ensnare their hearts. Every crackle of the approaching darkness sent a shiver down Max's spine, an instinctual fear that clawed at his throat. The shapes darted menacingly, long fingers reaching for any weakness, as tendrils of shadow swirled and snaked around their feet, creeping slowly up their legs like icy fingers trying to pull them into the abyss. Desperation throbbed through him, but amidst that fear, he felt the warmth of Mia's hand, her pulse strong against his. It anchored him, a reminder that they stood as one against an unfathomable darkness. He could see her brow furrowed in concentration, her bright eyes flickering like embers in the dim light. She was a beacon of tenacity. Yet, even in her resolve, he could see strands of doubt, fleeting glimpses of terror as the shadows whispered hunger into her ears, enticing, taunting, promising release from pain. "We cannot let them take us," Leo shouted, his voice steady yet strained, a valiant effort as he pushed a hand toward the encroaching dark. He felt the warmth build in his palm, but the shadows responded with guttural laughter, ominous and low, flickering just on the edge of their vision. The shadows erupted, forming writhing masses that twined around one another, merging to create grotesque figures with hollow eyes and twisted smiles, faces of the lost that felt painfully familiar. Max's breath hitched in his throat as he recognized one of the wretched specters, a figure that looked hauntingly like his mother, her face pale and drawn, eyes void of life, and lips curled in a mocking grin that seeped warmth away from his heart. The air grew heavier, compressed by an overwhelming wave of dread that threatened to shatter the fragile bubble of light they had forged together. "No," he whispered, eyes wide with terror, but the figure advanced, swaying hypnotically, almost gracefully, its fingers curling like blooms of darkness. It whispered his name, a soft caress that sent chills crawling down his spine. "Max," it crooned sweetly, each syllable dripping with sorrow. "You'll never escape. We are one. Just give in." He bit his lip, tasting blood, heart pounding against his chest as he fought the instinct to turn away. Behind him, Mia squeezed his hand, her voice rising, piercing through the despair. "Don't listen. They want to drag you back. This isn't real." Her words were like shards of glass, sharp and clear, cutting through the haze, yet they felt fragile against the cacophony of shadowed cries surrounding them. "Yes, we have our own memories, and they're brighter than yours," Leo joined, shouting with a desperation that resonated within the depths of their connection. Rage ignited within him, feeding his urgency to fight against the grasping darkness. "There's more to us than the pain. Remember the laughter, the good days. Remember our strength." Even as they fought back, the twisted faces loomed larger, warping, elongating into a ghastly array of smiles that charmed and cursed in equal measure. They clawed at his thoughts, a myriad of voices whispering woven tales of regret and sorrow that struck at his heart. Images flashed, moments of his childhood where he felt unseen, whispers of failure that seeped into his bones like poison, tales of betrayals from friends who turned away, wraiths of his own making, each more terrible than the last, slithering seamlessly into the depths of his mind. "You can't fight what you are," they shrieked as he wavered, and the shadows thickened, a dark tide that surged with the intent to consume. For every moment of warmth he focused on, shadows swirled around it, pulling it down into their cold embrace, their laughter becoming a menacing symphony echoing in his ears, sweet and sickly. He felt confusion shimmering, as the waves of darkness tugged at the edges of his memories, seeking to drown him in denial. "Focus!" Mia's voice cut through the abyss, firm and soothing as the shadows seemed to waver slightly, recoiling in the face of their shared vision. "We are not alone. Remember us, our friendship, our adventures, those sparks of joy we've had." From the corner of his eye, he caught movement, Leo stepping forward, pushing against the massive shadows that wallowed and wriggled hungrily. He felt the energy pulsing, a bond stretching thinner and stronger between them, sparking with electric fervor. "Together," Max whispered, drawing upon the light blooming within, feeling it expand his chest, swelling against the shadows as they shrieked in frustration. "Together," he echoed, voice growing stronger as determination washed over him. And as if summoned, the force of their memories, a fire forged in love and hope, cascaded like a roaring waterfall, flooding the darkness with light. The shadows screamed, a deafening chorus filled with agony, twisting and churning in a spiraling frenzy, their forms collapsing under the light as it engulfed them. The more they pushed, the brighter their own memories gleamed, a tapestry of moments woven through love, laughter, and resilience. The ground trembled beneath them as they stood together, their shared strength radiating outward, illuminating the air thick with dread and despair. Yet, even as the shadows faltered, Max felt the ominous weight pulling at the corners of his mind. The keeper lingered, lurking just beyond the threshold of the light, waiting for an opportunity to strike as the wretched darkness shifted like a living thing. "It's not over," it growled, its voice climbing through the layers of chaos, low yet insistent, each word a dark revelation that rattled his resolve. "You think you can defeat your fears. This light is an illusion. Your memories will betray you. You will always be haunted." Chills ran through him, every syllable pulling at the threads of his mind, threading doubts around him like whispers of fog. The shadows coiled, swirling back toward the keeper like a living cloak, the evil essence dripping with ancient malice. And yet, even as the darkness loomed larger, a reminder tugged at the corner of Max's consciousness, a spark of belonging that grounded him. "Remember who we are," he shouted once more, voice breaking against the tide, determination lending strength to each word. The light flared, forcing shadows back momentarily, yet a flicker of doubt flickered in the distance, the keeper looming just beyond with its overbearing presence, eager to consume the radiance they fought to maintain. And in that instant, within the chaos, Max caught sight of the distance they had traveled, the moments they had shared that had fortified their bond. His heart quickened through despair. They would not allow the keeper to win, not today. Each step forward ignited a memory, a tangible warmth filled with laughter. The keeper sneered, and they felt the beat of urgency reverberate through the air, a dark symphony that propelled the shadows forward once more, sweeping like a storm. "It is only a matter of time," it seemed to hiss, slithering a tendril toward them, its form rippling with dark promises of annihilation. "Stand firm, push through," Mia cried, and their bond glimmered, casting beams of light stronger than the shadow that occupied the space around them. Yet still, through the flickering veil, the keeper's voice oozed beneath the layers. "Are you so foolish to believe love can save you? Emotions are chains, and you remain shackled, forever tied to the past, dragging your burdens alongside you. You will never escape." Max felt a wave of hopelessness wash over him, a tide of despair. Shadows lunged closer, drawing nearer with each heartbeat, their mocking faces stretching with glee. But in the depths of his gut, a fire ignited, fierce and unyielding. It wasn't just love at stake. It was the essence of who they were, and no force of darkness would snuff that out. "You're wrong," he countered, voice strong, dissecting the weight of shadows threatening to engulf him. "These moments we cherish, joy, love, friendship, they're more powerful than you could ever comprehend. They're ours, and we will fight for them." The shadows hissed in anger, recoiling momentarily, creating space around them. The ground trembled with discord. Feeling unstable with every flicker of the light, they forged in unity. But the keeper surged, an indomitable wave of darkness pressing forward, claws reaching to snatch the light away. And so they faced it down, determined not to falter, their memories lighting the way as spectral figures formed behind them, ethereal silhouettes of love and joy driving the shadows back. Where light was, darkness wavered. Max felt each heartbeat, each breath melding into one, an unbreakable connection that formed a force powerful enough to push against the dark chains the keeper had woven tightly around their hearts. "We are more than the darkness," he shouted, pushing forward with every ounce of strength, while the keeper recoiled under the driving weight of their combined defiance. The cries of shadows echoed as they surged back, but the light countered it fiercely, illuminating the space between them and the dark creatures lurking. Their emptiness gaped like deep chasms, threatening to swallow every ounce of warmth. Yet as they stood, shoulder to shoulder against the tide, they had become an unyielding force, a wave that rose, uniting together against the horrors that loomed before them. "We will not back down," they roared, voices ringing out in fierce unison, pouring memories shaped by laughter, joy, and a relentless spirit into the light, slowly pushing back against the darkness, clawing for their freedom. And in that growing brilliance, hope sparked, a flicker against the horizon, one that refused to be extinguished. The light pulsed brighter, a beacon of resolve that seemed to repel the shadows. Max felt an electric surge course through him, as though the very air vibrated with power forged from their shared spirit. But just as they began to push back against the darkness, the keeper roared, its voice a monstrous growl that echoed through the air, reverberating in the very marrow of their bones. "Fools!" it hissed, shadows tearing through the edges, grasping and clawing, the frigid touch wrapping around them like the icy fingers of death. "You think this light can save you? I am the depth of despair. You cannot outrun what you truly are." The ground shifted ominously beneath their feet, trembling with a malevolent energy, and Max felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The shadows writhed, swirling at the edges like hungry serpents, their whispers turning into an incoherent chorus of doubts, echoing past and present fears in a cacophony that clawed at his sanity. Memories twisted and morphed, half-formed images flashing before his eyes, faces of those he had wronged, friendships he'd let slip away, a darkness growing inside that never seemed to fully fade. "Listen to them," the keeper taunted, its voice coiling around them like smoke, curling into their minds. "The whispers of regret, your failures, they linger like ghosts in the corridors of your heart. You are never free of them." As if summoned, shadows clawed at the ground, rising into grotesque forms, twisting like vines, merging with the darkness. Max could feel them pulling at the edges of his mind, the faces of friends turning to hollows, their eyes sunken and pleading. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in real time. Mia squeezed his hand tighter, her breathing quickening, but even through the fear, there was defiance in her gaze. "We are not afraid," she shouted, but doubt colored her voice, the tremor betraying the terror that underpinned her unwavering spirit. More and more, the surrounding dark seemed to pulse, thudding and growing like a heartbeat, as if encouraging their despair, feeding off their hesitation. "Give up," the shadows wailed, their sound chilling, a harmony of agony rhythmically crashing against the light. "Surrender to the darkness. Join us." He felt his pulse quicken, a thunderous drum echoing against the tumult. But within him, that spark, however faint, burned bright. Memories of laughter with Mia, the warmth of camaraderie with Leo, those moments strung together like pearls on an endless thread. Those memories resonated deeply. With each recollection, the light fought to push back against the encroaching shadows, and in that, he felt the unease waver just for a moment. Together, he shouted, feeling a surge of resolve. Their linked hands tailored to battle as they pressed on. Remember who we are. We can break free of these chains. The shadows recoiled, momentarily disoriented by the power of their unity. But the keeper was relentless, its shadows thrashing with renewed malevolence, the chaotic energy swirling violently, creating an oppressive weight that pushed down upon them like a thick fog. Walls of darkness encroached, closing in from all sides, forcing them to confront the depths of their fears. Do you see? The keeper condescended, its voice slithering through the air, a venomous whisper wrapping around his thoughts. Look around you. How long can you fend off the inevitable? Memories are chains that bind you tighter. Every moment you fail to escape solidifies your place in this darkness. Horror seeped into Max like cold water, flooding his veins, the shadows vibrating with a pulse that matched the rhythm of his fear. Grotesque creatures emerged from the darkness, morphing from memories he had locked away, faces he dared not remember. These monsters, conjured by his own doubts, reached out with long, twisted fingers, their grotesque forms grinning maliciously, poised to ensnare him back into their cold grasp. Remember the terror, the isolation, the loneliness. They crooned, their voices an eerie symphony he couldn't shake. You cannot escape. This is who you are, and you will never be free. He watched as tendrils of darkness wrapped around Leah, constricting tighter, pulling at her essence. The sound of her gasping breath echoed like the final whistle of a dying flame. No, Max bellowed, his heart racing as he lunged forward. But each step felt heavier, the nightmarish figures reaching for him, hunger gleaming in their hollow, starved eyes. Desperation clawed at his throat as the shadows coiled tighter, wrapping around Mia, constricting her body. He felt her light flickering, dimming under the pressure of their advancing darkness. Max could feel it, the despair wrapping around him, attempting to pull him into the void, beneath the shadows and into oblivion. Flashes of painful memories flared in front of him, of lost friendships, the gnawing loneliness that settled deep into his chest during quiet nights. The voices that whispered he would never measure up roared in a cacophony that drowned everything, drowning in frozen silence. You're nothing, the keeper crooned, a malignant grin forming centering on its grotesque visage. You will never escape. We will devour you. No! Mia screamed, her voice piercing through the stifling gloom, pulling him back from the precipice of despair. It struck a chime within him, igniting a small flame that flared momentarily, a reminder that hope was not yet extinguished. We are more than our fears, she shouted, reclaiming some of the light around them, her eyes flaring with strength. Max seized the moment, his hand clenching tighter around hers, feeling the warmth surge back into their grasp. This is not who we are, he echoed, feeling the tether between them, an unyielding bond that pulsed with life. The shadows seemed to recoil, uncertainty rippling through their forms as light flared briefly, momentarily illuminating the wretched faces before him. He could feel the surge of power building, the memories of cherished moments washing over him, igniting the fire that dwelled, training the corner of his soul. Together, Max shouted again, letting out a primal roar that shook through the depths of despair, carrying life back into the shadows. The brilliance of their memories surged, illuminating the darkness, causing it to writhe as shadows strained against the edges, shrieking in a manner that sent shivers down his spine. With determination, Max and Mia focused on their cherished memories, shared laughter at the campfire, stolen glances across crowded rooms, quiet conversations under the stars, all the moments that formed the fabric of their journey together. The light twisted and twined around them, growing stronger with each angry roar from the dark. You will not consume our joy, he yelled, pushing with all his might against the terrifying shape of shadows looming around them. A blinding flash erupted, illuminating the dark corners that had embedded into their souls, pulling the light back into them, pushing the darkness further away. The shadows shrieked as the brightness pushed against them, but deep, powerful voices called back from the abyss, reinforcements pouring from the depths to replace those that had drifted. Monstrous shapes encircled them, obscuring the path ahead, forcing them to confront the encroaching tide, the malevolence pouring thick and heavy, wrapping around their thoughts. The cold seeped in again, an ominous whisper threading through the chaos, promising its return. "You think you have won," it hissed, the keeper's eyes widening with a predatory gleam, bursting forth from the shadows, a visage as terrifying as a nightmare come to life. "As long as you carry the weight of your past, you will never truly be free." And Max, feeling the pressure closing in again, locked eyes with Mia, finding strength in their connection once more. Together they spread the light between them, fortifying their resolve, knowing that while the road ahead remained treacherous, they would not face it alone. The darkness didn't understand the strength that friendship forged. It would never grasp the radiant spark that remained so fiercely within them. "Never," he murmured, heart pounding, resolving to hold on. Shadows spiraled fiercely around them, but as long as they had each other, no fear would ever devour them whole. The darkness around them thrashed violently, hungry and angry, the air heavy with an oppressive weight that curled like tendrils of smoke, suffocating their resolve. Max felt the pulse of fear surge through him as the keeper's grotesque form loomed closer, its eyes glowing like molten coals set to consume all light in a greedy frenzy. "You think your memories can save you," it seethed, voice low and dripping with malice. "They are nothing but fragile illusions. How long until they shatter under the truth? You are nothing but shadows yourselves, gathering more darkness with every breath you take." The shadows responded with a chilling wind, howling through the air, swirling around them like a tempest, clawing at their skin, tasting their vulnerability. Max lost sight of the way forward, the memories flashing in his mind, turning to chaotic fragments, each fear pulling at the edges of his bravery, attempting to tear him down. They were screaming now, echoes of terror that seemed to chant his name, a twisted melody that turned the air thick and murky, filled with resentment and loneliness. As the keeper moved closer, the shadows stretched forth, transforming into twisted figures that mocked them, reflecting their darkest thoughts. "Look at you," they mocked, voices warped and sneering. "You're just like us. You cannot escape. You belong here. Embrace your true selves." Max saw fragments of his past, images of his worst moments flickering, faces twisted in pain, every regret taking form in the dark that encroached. He felt the chill bite into his flesh, sapping his warmth as he wrestled with the shadows of his insecurities, their brutal laughter echoing in his ears, drowning out the flicker of hope that remained. But then, in that moment of despair, a light broke through, the memory of Mia's laughter, her smile illuminating the harshness of his doubts. It surged through him, pushing against the encroaching tide, illuminating the darkness momentarily with a radiant glow that whispered promises of strength and bond. He turned to her, the fierceness in her gaze grounding him as she nodded, knowing that together they could withstand this storm. "We are not alone," he cried, pushing back against the darkness, refusing to let the bitter words of the keeper seep into his soul. "We are not defined by our past. We are strong together." With their voices ringing together, they reached deep into the vibrant collection of memories. The warmth of friendship, the bonds forged in laughter, the safety found in one another's company. The shadows seemed to recoil, a rippling reaction to the light they summoned together. The keeper hissed in frustration, its form twisting further and more grotesque as it fought against their united front. "You think you can resist?" it shrieked, and the ground beneath them shifted, cracking as deeper shadows erupted from the fissures. Monstrous forms swarmed forward, grotesque limbs stretching out, mouths agape with razor-sharp teeth glimmering in the dim light. a deeper hunger surged in their movements, each creature a collection of nightmares, eager to consume all joy in their path. As they charged, Max felt adrenaline spike through him, the pure terror driving him to act. He held Mia's hand tighter, the warmth of her fingertips anchoring him as he prepared to face the encroaching horror. The surroundings warped, the shadows of the monstrous figures whispering his hidden fears as they approached, their breath reeking of despair and bitterness. Bad memories flooded his mind. The silence after each failure, the isolation he turned to, creeping into his heart like a serpent. But he steered his thoughts back to Mia, to their friendship illuminated in moments shared, the love they had forged in this darkness. "We will fight," he shouted, his voice cutting through the clamoring darkness, igniting the light within them. With that declaration, warmth spread outwards, pushing against the shadows that surrounded them. The figures hissed and recoiled, cut by a light not meant to exist amidst the shadowy depths. "This is just the beginning," the keeper howled, voice bubbling with rage. "You think you can turn the tide? I will show you your true selves." The shadows convulsed, morphing until they coalesced into horrific faces. Friends turned enemies, the smiles now sinister grins, each memory a weight, dragging him down under the ocean of desperation. He could see Leo's face, twisted in anger, and the whispers of harsh words floated through the air like poison darts. "You'll always be alone," the shadows sneered, their voices echoing strangely in the air. "No one wants you. They never did. You are an abomination, a failure." Each voice mocked him, pain creeping deeper within, his heart creaking under the weight of it all. But he could see Mia standing strong, the fire in her eyes unwavering as she bore the brunt of their haunting words. "Max," she screamed with a voice that broke through despair, cutting through the noise encasing them. "Don't listen. Remember who we are and what we've fought for. We are together. You are not alone." In that moment, it felt like an explosion ignited within him, tendrils of hope radiating as he grasped tight to the essence of their friendship. He took a deep breath, pushing against the darkness, leaning into that warmth that had become their shared lifeline. "We are not alone," he bellowed, feeling the light grow as it poured from his heart, pushing the shadows away, illuminating the terrifying forms surrounding them as they shrieked in anger and pain. The warmth enveloped them, creating a barrier that started to push back against the growing tide of terror. "You cannot have us," Max shouted, eyes blazing with conviction. The shadows hissed, recoiling in horror as the light grew stronger, wrapping around them, feeding on their fears. Every word spoken carried power. Every memory shared lit the path ahead. The light brightened around them, a protective cocoon spreading outward, scattering the dark beings as they shrieked, their forms diminishing under the pressure of the light expanding. The keeper screeched, its voice slicing through the air, a cacophony of fury and contempt. "This isn't over," it howled, shadows swirling in a frantic mix of rage and desperation. The grip of darkness thrashed around, but the light surged stronger still, pushing aggressively against all it could not possess. And in that illuminated moment, Max was filled with a sense of purpose, the knowledge that he and Mia were stronger together, forged through the fire of adversity. The encroaching darkness struggled, unable to reclaim what had been lost, while the light pushed ever forward, illuminating the path ahead, a path that promised freedom, strength, and unbreakable bonds amidst the chaos. "We will fight until the end," he yelled, conviction surging through his voice like thunder, propelling the light deeper, pushing against the weight of the darkness that clung to them. Shadows melted, retreating further, relinquishing their grasp against the rising tide of defiance. And beneath the shadows, he caught a glimpse of an opening, the first real hint of a way out. He turned to Mia, her eyes fierce, lighting the darkness with bravery, and their shared hope became a beacon of pure light, an undeniable force against the despair threatening to crush them once more. Together, they stepped forward, hand in hand, determined to face whatever horrors lay beyond the shadows. In the depths of despair, A primal scream of defiance rang true. For every struggle they faced, it would only strengthen their resolve to break free from the chains that sought to bind them. And with each step, the darkness hissed its anguish. But they pressed on, united, undeterred, and unwavering. The shadows writhed, angry tendrils snapping back toward them, as if tasting the edges of their light. Max and Mia pushed forward, determination guiding their every step, feeling the ancient dread coiling tighter around them as the oppressive atmosphere threatened to crush their spirits. The further they walked, the more they could hear the soft whispers of the abyss clawing at their minds, trying to seep into their thoughts, weaving tales of defeat and despair. "You're too weak to face what lies ahead," the whispers echoed, a chilling harmonization that sounded eerily comforting. Max felt a shiver dance down his spine like icy fingers tracing his every fear aloud. Black, shadowy figures loomed just out of reach, flitting at the edges of his vision, mocking their advance. The more they moved, the closer the figures became, their shapes morphing like silhouettes in a dance of dread. "They're feeding on our doubts," Mia whispered, her voice strained but steady. She tightened her grip on his hand, sharing warmth that countered the cold creeping in from every corner of the dark. "We can't give in," Max urged, taking a step further as the shadows swarmed closer, their twisted faces now forming with each heartbeat. They bore expressions of despair, a haunting reflection of his own fears. He could see flickering images of his failures, people drifting away, their horrified looks tearing at his heart. With every breath, he almost believed the darkness was right, that maybe they were better off alone, that hope was just a cruel illusion meant to break them down.